Chapter 181, Magic Stone Elements. Besides specific celestial alignments and rituals, the creation of the Philosopher's Stone also requires certain elemental conditions, Elrond told Dewey in the Hall of Fire in Rivendell. I've mostly deciphered the runes on the blueprint. According to the explanations there, making the Philosopher's Stone requires the 3 primes and the 4 elements. These conditions are indispensable. Without them, the stone cannot be completed. What are the 3 primes and the 4 elements? Dewey asked. Elrond answered with a look of admiration. The 3 primes are the salt of the body, the mercury of the spirit, and the sulfur of the soul. The 4 elements are water, fire, wind, and earth. That's not all, Elrond went on. I do not know which sage devised such a remarkable vision, but whoever it was did not merely seek immortality. He intended the stone to be a medium for perceiving the mysteries of the universe, to attain what he calls spiritual harmony, the ultimate refinement of the soul. As for immortality, he added, that is merely an extension of the Philosopher's Stone, more a byproduct than the goal. Dewey stared. He had always assumed the Philosopher's Stone simply granted immortality and turned lead to gold. Elrond's explanation startled him. He recounted Nicholas Flamel's case to Elrond. The elf listened, considered, then shook his head. I suspect the stone made by the person you mentioned is not a true Philosopher's Stone in the fullest sense, but a semi-finished product, Elrond said. The making of the stone is itself a path of cultivation. The creator must unite spirit, soul, and matter, achieving spiritual harmony the moment the stone is completed. Only then is the stone perfect. The person you spoke of clearly had not reached that harmony when he created his, which is why his stone was imperfect. Dewey felt a pang. Nicholas Flamel had lived so long and not attained spiritual harmony. Could he have made a perfect stone? He forced himself to think practically. At least a semi-finished stone would extend my life, he told himself. I can work toward completion later. Lord Elrond, he asked, I understand the 4 elements, but what exactly are the salt of the body, the mercury of the spirit, and the sulfur of the soul? Elrond explained. The 3 primes are not ordinary salt, mercury, or sulfur. They are products of the unity of body, spirit, soul, and real matter. Where can they be found? Dewey probed. The mercury of the spirit represents spiritual fluidity, Elrond replied. At the Grey Havens on the Great Western Coast, it is the essence that carries the elves' longing and farewell to Middle-earth, the weight of time and unspoken memory. If you seek the mercury of the spirit, gather it there. I'm sure the Lord of the Grey Havens will assist you. Of the 3 primes, this is the easiest to obtain. Next is the sulfur of the soul, Elrond continued. It is the fire of the soul and can only be found where souls have gathered. Besides the halls of Mandos, there are places where souls refused Mandos's call and wandered. One such place is the Paths of the Dead at the end of the White Mountains, where the men of Erech linger. Isildur cursed them for breaking an oath, and their souls were confined there after death. If you want the sulfur of the soul, you must go there. But the dead there deny entry to the living, and I would not enter lightly myself. If you intend to go, be fully prepared. Dewey nodded. He knew the legend of the Paths of the Dead. Isildur had bound the men of Erech to swear to come to Gondor's aid in times of need. When they later broke their oath and feared Sauron, Isildur cursed them to unrest until they fulfilled their vow. Their souls were trapped, and the paths became guarded by the dead, who refused the living. Only when Aragorn, at Elrond's urging, claimed Isildur's name and showed the reforged blade did the dead answer and join him. And the salt of the body? Dewey asked, feeling the question was being left to last on purpose. Elrond's expression grew serious. The salt of the body represents stability and vitality. It is most likely to appear where life first began. The elves' birthplace Quivienin was submerged after the War of Wrath in the First Age. The dwarves' origin is known only to the Valar who made them. Only men's first home, Hildorian, is likely to yield it. But Hildorian lies in the Far East, and its exact location I do not know. It may have been lost to history, and it is within territory now ruled by Sauron. If you go there, you must rely on yourself and be wary of Sauron. He hates you for foiling his plans. One misstep could be fatal. Dewey listened gravely and thanked Elrond. He felt fortunate to have such counsel. Searching on his own would have taken forever. Elrond, however, sighed and shook his head. To be honest, I would advise you to wait 2 years, he said. After Lady Galadriel purifies the heart of the Balrog, you could use its undying fire to forge the Phoenix Fire and gain immortality. The Philosopher's Stone has too many uncertainties. The paths of the dead in the Far East are dangerous. One mistake could mean eternal damnation, and I would hate to see Arwen heartbroken. Dewey looked up, solemn. Lord Elrond, I promise I will not recklessly endanger myself, nor will I give Arwen any reason to grieve. Elrond saw the sincerity in his face and allowed himself a gentle smile. I am willing to believe you. They moved on to the 4 elements. Water, fire, and wind are easily provided, Elrond said. Lady Galadriel's ring Nenya will condense water, Gandalf's ring Narya can kindle fire, and my ring Vilya can summon wind. He raised his hand. A sapphire golden ring flashed on his finger, and a small storm of wind elements whirled in his palm. Only the earth element you will need to provide yourself. How should I find the earth element? Dewey asked, frowning. When Celebrimbor forged the 3 elven rings, why didn't he make one for earth as well? Elrond shook his head. I do not know. The hint I can give is that it must be a treasure born from the earth itself, inherently extraordinary. Would mithril count? Dewey produced the mithril mother and showed it to Elrond. The elf's surprise was visible, but he shook his head. Mithril is the fusion of divine and other forces within a special environment. Wonderful, but not something born of earth in the sense needed. Dewey then took out a gem that glowed with white light. Elrond's surprise deepened. The Arkenstone? He asked. Dewey nodded. Yes, the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain, born of the rock. It should work, right? Elrond did not ask how Dewey had come by the gem that symbolized Durin's kingship. He took it, felt its weight, and smiled softly. It seems fate favors you, Dewey. This heart of the mountain contains the essence of the earth. With it, the 4 elements you need are complete. Relief and joy washed over Dewey. He had taken the Arkenstone from Thorin in a dark hour and kept it hidden. He never imagined it would be the final piece. What will you do next? Elrond asked. Start with the easy and then the hard, Dewey replied after a moment. I'll go to the Grey Havens first, for the mercury of the spirit, then to the paths of the dead, in the southern White Mountains for the sulfur of the soul, and finally to the far east to seek Hildorian. Elrond nodded. If you go to the Grey Havens, visit Círdan, the lord there. He is the oldest and perhaps the wisest among us, and a member of the White Council. If you encounter difficulties, seek his counsel. I believe he will gladly help. 182. Westward Journey. On the training grounds of Rivendell, Dewey and Elrohir were locked in a sparring match. Elladan and Arwen watched from the sidelines. Dewey, wearing a long, fitted elven battle tunic sewn for him by Arwen, wielded the divine spear Eglos. With superhuman reflexes and agility, he continually dodged and parried Elrohir's strikes. Though still at a disadvantage, he could hold his ground and exchange blows instead of being quickly routed. Elrohir fought with the effortless grace and beauty of an elf. Expression relaxed, but his eyes curiously approving of his opponent. Under years of training with Elrohir and Elladan, Dewey had unconsciously absorbed something of elven fighting style. If one didn't look at his ears, one might mistake him for an elf. The Ent draught from the Ent had brought his physique up to elven standards as well, which explained how his skills had leapt forward so quickly and how he could last as long as he did against a veteran like Elrohir. Arwen and Elladan watched with approving looks. Dewey's skilledness is improving fast. Give him more time, and he might even be a formidable warrior, Elladan remarked admiringly. Arwen followed Dewey's movements with soft eyes and shook her head slightly. He doesn't need to become a warrior. Magic is his greatest strength. Elladan nodded, smiling. Indeed, compared to his magic, his martial arts are still rookie level. After all, he's the black-robed wizard known across Middle-earth. If he used his magic, Elrohir and I would probably be the ones getting beaten. The bout ended soon enough. As expected, Dewey lost this round. Elrohir sheathed his sword and handed the captured Eglos back with a smile. Your skill is reaching a peak. Even some elven warriors would struggle with you. You're qualified. Simple sparring will no longer suffice. If you wish to improve further, you'll need life and death fights. Dewey took the spear, breathed in, and nodded. I understand. And thank you. To you and Eladon for all these years of training, I've learned a great deal." He knew that although they called it sparring, Elrohir and Eladon had taught him many techniques without reservation, feeding him moves so he wouldn't remain just a fragile wizard. There was perhaps a little irritation that he had stolen their beloved sister away, but it was harmless. Elrohir's smile grew warmer at that, and his resentment lessened. They stepped down from the platform. Arwen approached Dewey, gently dabbing his sweat with a soft silk handkerchief and offering a cup. "Tired? Drink some water." Dewey deliberately leaned toward her, softening his gaze, and allowed her to wipe him. He took the cup and drank in a single swallow. His spirits lifted and the fatigue drained away. Seeing the light in his eyes, Arwen smiled. "This is dew I collected from the white tree leaves, with a little honey. If you like it, I'll prepare it for you when you travel." Dewey's face brightened. "I'd like that." The two brothers, momentarily forgotten, felt a fresh twinge of bitterness. Their already diminished resentment flared again. They despised a scoundrel who'd lured away their sister. Eladon quickly diverted the mood. "Arwen told me you recently reforged a fine sword. Bring it out for us to see." Elrohir agreed. Dewey exchanged a helpless look with Arwen. Her brothers always ruined the mood. Arwen gave him an amused, comforting look and put away her handkerchief so as not to add to Dewey's sufferings in front of them. At their request, Dewey extended his hand and softly called Flame Sword. At his word, a magnificent silver blade materialized in his grip. A red gem in the hilt glowed with an inner fire, warming the air around them. Elrohir and Eladon stared in awe. "I feel an unbearable heat from this blade. If I touched it, I'd be burned," Elrohir exclaimed, instinctively leaning back. Dewey smiled and offered the sword to him. "Try holding it." Elrohir was startled by the gesture. He clearly felt the heat, terrifying enough to kill, but when he laid fingers on the blade, the burn never came. He felt only a comforting warmth. Arwen, a little helpless at his teasing, explained, "This flame sword is intensely hot, but once it recognizes Dewey and receives his permission, it won't harm anyone. You needn't worry." On hearing this, Elrohir and Eladon relaxed and marveled at the weapon. Just then, Elrond appeared nearby with Lindir at his side. Father Arwen, Elrohir, and Eladon greeted together. "Lord Elrond, Lindir, what brings you here?" Dewey asked, surprised. Elrond's gaze fell on the sword in his son's hand. From a distance, he had felt a scorch and come to see. He smiled gently. "Is this the flame sword you reforged, Dewey? May I examine it?" "Of course." Dewey handed it over, and Elrond inspected it closely. He spoke with a tone of admiration. "A rare forging technique. It pushes the metal nearly to its limits, imbuing it with memory. It is exceedingly sharp, nearly unbreakable, self-repairing, and can absorb beneficial essences to grow stronger. Such skill surpasses what elven or dwarf smiths typically possess. You have brought me a new wonder." Dewey was surprised but not shocked. Elrond was one of Middle-earth's wisest scholars and could read crafted things like books. Elrond then let Vilya, the Ring of Air, appear between his fingers, its gem shining like a distant blue star. He took the flame sword and poured the ring's power into it. "Lord Elrond, what are you doing?" Dewey asked, startled. The sword accepted the ring's power and became even more extraordinary. Elrond smiled and handed it back. "Try it." Dewey swung the blade a few times and found the sword moved with astonishing speed. Where air resistance had been, now momentum pushed the blade forward, leaving afterimages. He made a powerful cut into empty space. A blade of condensed air shot from the sword and, in a single clean stroke, split a large rock across the clearing. "Sword chi?" Dewey's eyes lit up. For a moment, he felt as if he'd slipped into a wuxia tale. The split showed not only a smooth cut, but edges scorched and slightly melted. That sword chi was not only sharp, but incredibly hot, doubling the strike's effect. The onlookers were amazed. Dewey was elated. His flame sword was now a true hybrid, a close combat weapon that could also launch long-range attacks. "How can I ever thank you, Lord Elrond?" he said. Elrond shook his head gently. "On this journey, strive to return safely. Do not let Arwen worry." Dewey looked at Arwen. His expression softened. "I will return safely," he promised. Because Dewey was about to set out on a long journey, Elrond, Elrohir, and Eladon stepped away to give him and Arwen privacy. The two walked slowly through Rivendell's winding river valley passages. Elves keep their emotions contained and enduring. Arwen did not cling or demand to go with him. She simply said, "While you are away, I will stay at Hogwarts to care for your companions and your people. Do not worry about home. Only remember to protect yourself." She removed the Evenstar from her chest and placed it in Dewey's hand. "Let this guard you when I cannot. Wherever you are, I am with you." Dewey looked at the starlit gem, then at Arwen, whose calm strength stirred him. He inhaled deeply and hugged her tightly, drinking in her scent. "It's so good to have you," he murmured. Arwen, surprised but pleased, curved her brows into a soft arc and let her arms circle him, laying a gentle hand on his back. For the next few days, Dewey stayed with Arwen. They returned together to Weathertop. Every day, Arwen collected dew from white tree leaves to make restorative draughts and picked melon fruits to bake lembas for his journey. She packed them as his water and rations. When the time came to part, Arwen remained in the keep, while Dewey mounted the great eagle Thorondor and departed Weathertop. His first destination was the Grey Havens on the western coast. Besides seeking materials to forge the Philosopher's Stone, his trip was also a pilgrimage of sorts, so he did not shortcut the journey by using the Floo network to visit Bilbo's house. Instead, he flew north from Weathertop, planning a detour to Fornos Doraine, north of the Weathertop Hills, before continuing west. Chapter 182, North Downs Weathertop, is the southernmost peak of the Weathertop Hills. Dewey rode the great eagle Thorondor, flying north across rolling lowlands and then a stretch of open plains. It was his first time on Thorondor, and the ride was exhilarating. Thorondor was enormous. His wingspan must have been 50 meters. Only the ancestor of the great eagles, the true Thorondor, might have been larger. That growth was largely thanks to the Ents's Entdraht. Treebeard favored Thorondor. Every time Dewey traded plant growth potions for Entdraht and Fangorn, Treebeard slipped an extra ration to the young eagle. Thorondor seemed to swell without end. If he wanted, he could probably return to the Misty Mountains and vie for Eagle King, but neither he nor Dewey had any ambition for that. For now, he was a giant juvenile who patrolled his territory, occasionally harried the great kraken over the Black Lake, and provided the folks of Hogsmeade with regular entertainment, so long as their squabbles didn't cause real trouble. The great eagle's speed was incredible. In less than half a day, they reached a range of hills that rose like an embankment at the northern edge of the plains, the North Downs of Eriador. At their southern foot lay the ruined city of Fornost, once the capital of Arthedain. After Arnor split into Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudor, Cardolan's Barrow Downs and Arthedain's Fornost later fell to the Witch King of Angmar. The Barrow Downs were tainted, and tombs there filled with Barrow Wights. Fornost itself had been razed. Its stones lay in ruin. Dewey circled above the ruined city and frowned. Like the Barrow Downs, the ruins and their surrounds were thick with a malign presence. Dark, shrouding clouds and mist clung to the sky above Fornost. The air felt stale and bitter with malice. Thorondor was restless, circling warily and reluctant to come close. "It'll be fine, Thorondor. Stay calm. Let's land," Dewey soothed. Thorondor hesitated, then descended and settled just before the city ruins. Dewey swung down and walked among toppled walls and scattered tombs, uneasy at the pervading curse. Could Barrow Wights be here as well? He tried to query the system, but there was no reply. Apparently, he had to penetrate deeper. Thorondor hovered at a safe height, ready to provide aid, while Dewey picked his way over rubble toward the old city gate. The moment he stepped inside the ruins, the dormant evil stirred as if roused. Black mist rolled in, the air chilled, and a spirit of shadow rose from the ground, less a body than a swirl of black vapor with a hollow, obsidian skull and outstretched claws that lunged for him. "Avada Kedavra!" Dewey shouted, but the killing curse passed through the specter as if through mist and smashed into stone behind it. The spirit was faster than it looked, a flicker of darkness, and Dewey had to dart aside. It attacked again, relentless. "Flame sword!" Dewey called. A blade of heat and light sprang into his hand, and he whirled it at the spirit. The creature's incorporeal form ignored ordinary blades, but when the sword struck, it shrieked and dissolved like frost before the sun, corroded and burned away until nothing remained. Dewey had expected no less. His flame sword bore basilisk venom, fiendfire, and the light of Arendelle, the kinds of counterforces that could reduce Horcruxes and undo corrupt spirits. If it could not dispel a haunted thing here, it would have been useless. But that first spirit was only an amuse-bouche. The next moment, hundreds, then thousands of shadowy figures rose from graves and rubble, men and women, old and young, all the former inhabitants of Fornost, corrupted by the Witch King's power and now spectral. Their air was heavy with resentment, fear, and bitterness. They pressed inward, a seething tide of malice. Dewey was unaffected by the oppressive emotions his flame sword and training held, but he would not be overwhelmed. Expecto Patronum. A dazzling silver light burst from him and formed a great ward that expanded into a barrier, scattering the massed spirits. From its center flew a huge silver owl Patronus, beating brilliant wings and tearing into the evil apparitions. The Patronus's talons shredded them, and Dewey pressed the advantage, slashing with the flame sword and watching the evil shapes disintegrate. At that moment, the system finally responded. Hogwarts sign-in system, locating North Downs Fornost. Do you wish to sign in? Sign in. Dewey did not pause his defense. Sign in successful. Congratulations. Dark mark acquired. Dark mark? Dewey blinked in the middle of battle. He associated the dark mark with Voldemort's sigil for marking and summoning Death Eaters, not something he expected to receive here. Still, there was no time to worry. With the sign-in done, he could have left, but Fornost sat not far from Weathertop. If the Witch King ever rallied these spirits toward the south, the people at Weathertop's base could be endangered. Better to cleanse the area now. Before he could act, a distant cry, half wolf, half hound, rose from the North Downs, and the remaining specters turned as if hearing a command. They streamed toward the hills. Dewey's expression hardened. Something, or someone, was directing them. He called to Thorondor. The great eagle dove and hovered before him. Dewey leapt up on his back and pointed toward the hills. "Follow that pack, now!" Thorondor swept north. As Dewey drew near the ridge where the spirits clustered, a shower of arrows streamed up from below. "Pertigo!" An invisible shield snapped into place around Dewey and the eagle, scattering the volleys. Arrows came from tunnels and caves in the hillsides. Dozens of small creatures, short-limbed, green-skinned, bulging-eyed, appeared in the cave mouths and on ledges, shrieking and firing. Dewey recognized the sort of thing from rumors. Goblins of a kind that had degenerated from orc stock, small, malicious, and closer in stature to the goblins he'd seen in other wild places. They babbled and screamed more than spoke. Their language had crumbled into harsh cries and hoarse roars. Whatever you called them, they were a type of orc, and Dewey felt no pity. "Exploding bolt," he cried. A blazing missile struck a cavern entrance. The charge detonated, shattering stone, collapsing the cave, and sending many goblins to their deaths. The survivors fled or dove into burrows. But the spirits had a grisly stratagem. As bodies and corpses lay, the dark entities drilled into the dead goblins, animating them. The corpses rose, limbs jerking, faces twisted into hollow screams, the spirits fighting on from within dead flesh. The Patronus could not reach those spirits sheltered inside meat. Dewey tightened his grip on the flame sword and struck. He swung. The blade threw out a burning, glowing air razor that sliced through distance like a blade of heat. It cleaved through a possessed goblin, bisecting and scorching the body. The spirit escaped the shattered husk and, from Dewey's bloodless horror, burrowed into another corpse nearby, eager to continue its assault. Dewey's scowl deepened. Killing the hosts did not finish the enemy. The malice would keep hunting for bodies. He raised his sword and readied another spell. Chapter 184, Demon Wolf. Seeing the bodies of the goblins he'd burned become hosts for evil spirits, Dewey's brows tightened. He snorted coldly. "You think you can hide in a shell and make me helpless? Let's see how well you hide without it." He waved his wand, summoned Fiendfire, and directed it at the spirits inhabiting the goblins. The eerie blue fire formed a tongue of flame that attacked both spirit and corpse. Any goblin touched by the Fiendfire turned to ash. As the bodies were incinerated, the spirits were exposed, souls corrupted into malevolence. Fiendfire cannot destroy souls, but it can shatter the evil power that clings to them. Under the inferno, the spirits writhed, their aura thinned and dissipated like smoke, growing weaker. Fiendfire, however, has limits. Though it will burn nearly any combustible and even weaken the hardest metals, it cannot burn earth or great rocks. The disembodied spirits could pass through solid matter and slip beneath the ground to safety. The goblins, by contrast, were not so lucky. Terrified by the fire, they fled in blind panic. Some ducked into tunnels and caves, but the fiend fire, like a bloodhound on a scent, slid into cave mouths and pressed its attack. The goblin numbers in the North Downs were never great. After the Witch King of Angmar crippled Arthedain, the main orc bands had been scattered by the allied elves and men. Only isolated bands remained, sheltering in ruined strongholds and preying on passing travelers. They had not expected a harbinger of doom today. Chased by fiendfire, the goblins had nowhere to run and were reduced to ash. Even those deep in the caverns could not escape. After the last goblin was consumed, Dewey did not quench the flames. Instead, he shaped the fiendfire into the likeness of a Balrog and sent it to the half-collapsed watchtower on the hill. The fiendfire Balrog radiated unbearable heat and conjured a whip of flame it lashed at the tower. Stone blocks shattered. Though fiendfire cannot burn stone outright, it bakes it until it cracks and bursts. A coward, hiding in a tower. Do you think I didn't see you? Dewey sneered and cast an exploding bolt that blew the tower apart. As the blast finished, rubble rained and dust filled the air. The creature inside was forced out. A giant wolf, shrouded in black mist, leaped free. It moved with startling speed, dodging the fiendfire like a gust of wind, and in a few bounds reached a deep pool of water some distance away. It was as large as an ox, eyes burning with a blood-red malevolent light. Its whole body emanated dark power. A warg, Dewey muttered, then shook off the thought. Wargs aren't this large or this powerful. Wargs are large, intelligent wolves corrupted by darkness, but they differ little from ordinary wolves aside from size and cunning. This beast, however, pulsed with dark magic. A dense black aura gnawed at the air. Its saliva sizzled on the ground like acid. In Dewey's perception, it was no wolf. This was a demon wearing wolf's hide, a creature far more dangerous than any warg. Then, to Dewey's astonishment, the wolf spoke. Black-robed wizard doer, I have heard of your deeds and know your methods. I have no wish to be your enemy. Dewey narrowed his eyes. You know me? The famous black-robed wizard, master of dragons, slayer of Balrogs, scourge of orcs. Even in the dark places your name is spoken, the wolf said smoothly. And what are you? You differ from any warg I've seen. Wargs? Humph, they are beasts ridden by orcs, the wolf sneered, then let arrogance fill its posture. I am Skull, demon wolf of the old line, descended from the great patriarchs Draugluin and Karkaroth, once guardians of the Dark Lord Morgoth. Dewey's memory flickered to a passage he'd read in Rivendell's library. Demon wolves were creatures Morgoth bred, wolves with implanted evil spirits. Their patriarch Draugluin had even drunk Morgoth's blood. Their fate was entwined with the tale of Luthien and Beren. He remembered Arwen's telling how Beren, for love of the elf princess Luthien, was given an impossible task by Luthien's father, bring a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Beren ventured alone to Angband and was captured, kept by the demon wolf Draugluin. Luthien, disguised and accompanied by the hound Huan, infiltrated Angband and rescued him. Draugluin died fighting Huan. Later, as they fled, they met Draugluin's descendant Karcharoth, endowed by Morgoth with the hunger to devour elves and men. Karcharoth devoured the Silmaril, was burned by its light, went mad, and only fell after a terrible struggle that cost Beren his life and the hound Huan its strength. The story showed just how dreadful demon wolves could be. No wonder this creature was so full of itself. Wargs, Dewey knew, were descended, at least in part, from demon wolves mingling with ordinary wolves, so they were kin, yet Skull spoke with disdain for both wargs and orcs. Seeing Dewey's silence, Skull pressed on. Wizard Dewey, our line dwindles. I do not seek strife. I live secluded here in the North Downs and take offerings from these goblins. Past conflicts were misunderstandings. If you stop hostilities and negotiate, I will never invade your lands. I can even serve you secretly, clear obstacles for you, especially against those northern Dunedain. How about making you king of the northern lands? Dewey smiled faintly. You, a single wolf, can do that? Skull, sensing his pitch had hooked the wizard, spoke faster. Not just me. I can call kin. Demon wolves follow the strong. You have subjugated dragons and slain Balrogs. You are the strongest. We will follow you. Our pelt can withstand elven swords. Our claws pierce dwarven mail. Our venom fangs poison orcs. And we can even summon undead to fight for us. We could be your elite army, sweeping the continent for you. So those spirits in Fornost answer to you? Dewey asked. Skull answered with a long howl. The hidden spirits rose from beneath the earth and swarmed to him, circling the demon wolf as if rallying to their master. Wizard Duyr, will you join me? These undead are but a beginning. Together we can summon ranks of them. No one in Eriador could stop you. His voice was seductive, confident. Dewey studied the writhing spirits and the wolf, then let out a short laugh and shook his head. I don't think so. Skell's confident expression faltered. What do you mean? I thought. Because I don't buy your lies, Dewey said coldly. Wolves are cunning, and today you've proven it. Where did you learn that silver tongue, Sauron? It's a pity he never taught you that I've tangled with him before. That stench clinging to you, it's his. Before Skull could react properly, Dewey hissed, Avada Kedavra! A flash of emeralds slashed toward the demon wolf. Skull twisted with inhuman speed and dodged the killing curse, but Dewey's trap was already closing. Fiendfire surged outward and took form around him, the flames rushing up into a ring that sealed him in. Dewey had never intended to let the wolf walk away. He had humored it to prevent escape, to lead it into a snare. Now the encirclement was complete, and it was time to finish the hunt. Skull's eyes filled with fury and dread. He darted and writhed, trying every angle for escape, but the walls of fire blocked every road. In a final gambit, the demon wolf did something unexpected. He paused, inhaled deeply, and swallowed. The spirits that had been swirling independently surged into his maw and were consumed. His aura flared, the black mist thickened, forming a dense barrier that pushed back the flames. The fiendfire burned and ate at the mist, but the barrier bought Skull a moment. Seizing it, Skull blackened into a shadow, and in one swift blur, slipped through the thinning ring of fire and broke free. Chapter 185, Evil Spirit Parasitism. The demon wolf's sudden surge startled Dewey, but it didn't stop him from pressing the attack. Thorondor, catch it! The great eagle Thorondor cried out, beat his wings, and became a blur as he pursued the wolf. No matter how fast the wolf ran, it could not match an aerial predator. Thorondor closed the gap and lunged with razor-sharp talons. The demon wolf, sensing the threat, dodged sideways as if it had eyes in the back of its head. Avada Kedavra! Dewey cried from Thorondor's back, launching the green-blazing killing curse. The curse struck, and several evil spirits were ripped from the wolf's body and dissipated instantly. The demon wolf howled in pain but kept sprinting on. Dewey's confident face fell. The Avada Kedavra had only removed a few of the spirits. The principal evil spirit inside the wolf remained untouched. Avada Kedavra strips the soul from a body, but this creature was harboring hundreds of spirits. His spell had only cleared minor parasites. With that realization, Dewey stopped wasting such powerful magic. Seeing Dewey and Thorondor close, the demon wolf let loose a long howl. From the North Downs forest, a dozen answering howls rose in unison. More demon wolves? Dewey frowned. In moments, over a dozen demon wolves the size of oxen gathered, clearly rallying to Skull's command. Dewey struck without hesitation, slashing with his flame sword. The fiery airblade cleaved a wolf from waist to ribs. It burst into flames with a pained scream, and a high, ghostly wail escaped from within. Once freed from their bodies, the evil spirits poured out as black smoke. The bodies, bereft of their spirits, disintegrated and turned to ash. But Skull charged forward and swallowed one of the escaping spirits whole. Immediately his aura intensified and his body swelled. Dewey's expression darkened. His kill had only made Skull stronger. Now Skull had another spirit inside him, making him even harder to deal with. For a moment, Dewey hesitated. Killing more wolves would liberate more spirits for Skull to devour, but not killing them would leave him surrounded. Then, Dewey noticed something. Although Skull grew more powerful with each spirit he ate, his coordination suffered. It turned out that a wolf's body was meant to host a single spirit. Sharing a body forced competing wills into conflict. The dominant spirit had been able to suppress lesser ones when Skull had swallowed many weak spirits, but now he had consumed another spirit of comparable strength. The two wills bickered, and the wolf's movements had become clumsy and uncoordinated. Dewey smiled coldly. Want to keep devouring spirits? I'll help you. He no longer held back. Wand in one hand, flame sword in the other, he conjured barriers and obstacles to slow the wolves while cutting them down with flaming air blades. Thorondor dove and tore into them with steel talons and a crushing beak. Under the combined assault, demon wolves fell one after another. Their spirits streamed free as ragged black smoke and shrieked into the air. As Dewey had predicted, Skull, his mind now chaotic from multiple spirits, bolted toward each escaping wraith and swallowed it whole. With every spirit Skull devoured, his presence thickened into a black, oppressive pressure. The sky dimmed beneath the weight of his evil. But his eyes were no longer purely cunning. They flitted madly, full of struggle and fractures. Dozens, then hundreds, of competing consciousnesses now fought for control of his body. Where once a single will directed the wolf, now limbs and muscles obeyed many tiny masters. "All of you, be quiet. If you don't listen, we'll all die." Skull growled, his voice a ragged roar. For a heartbeat, the voices inside him quieted, but Dewey seized the moment and fired another spell. Imperio. The charm struck true. The fragile peace inside Skull collapsed into chaos. The devoured spirits erupted into a frenzy, each trying to seize control. The wolf stiffened, its two eyes staring in different directions, its limbs moving independently, every muscle seemingly governed by a separate mind. It froze like a puppet with tangled strings. "Now!" Dewey shouted. He leapt from Thorondor's back, drove the flame sword into Skull's skull, and activated its full power. Fire, basilisk venom, fiend fire, Arundel's light, and the ring of air unleashed themselves through the blade. Life fled Skull in an instant. The flames in his eyes guttered out. At the same time, dozens of high, wrenching screams burst from his body, an anguished chorus of vengeful spirits. Dewey ripped the sword free and somersaulted away. A swarm of black smoke poured from Skull's corpse, drifting and writhing as it sought new hosts. Dewey's Patronus blossomed into a shining ward and contained them all. He produced the crystal vial and poured Arendel's light into the warded space. The holy starlight touched the spirits, and they dissolved like frost under the sun, vanishing one by one. When the last spirit faded, Dewey closed the vial with a heavy sigh. Arendel's light was not infinite. Every drop counted. If he could avoid using it, he would, but today he had little choice. He glanced at Skull's remains, where once he had stood, only ash and scorched bone remained. There was no triumph in Dewey's face. The battle had been draining. These foes weren't like the ordinary enemies he'd faced before. Plain spells had little effect on spirits, and physical blows were often meaningless. The thought of what awaited him on the path of the dead tightened his chest. An army of ghosts awaited there, and he was not Aragorn or a descendant of Isildur who might command them some respect. Ghosts did not fear Avada Kedavra. They were already dead, and ordinary magic would not necessarily suffice. The wraiths and other dark things there would require different methods entirely. He pushed those worries aside for the moment and mounted Thorondor. After half a day of trouble, his only tangible reward besides the dark mark he'd gained for signing in was a few chests of copper and silver from a goblin horde, a disappointing haul. The goblin cave had been complex and winding. His fiend fire left it silent and empty. He rummaged through the ruins and finally found their treasury, but it contained little more than broken armor and a few low-value chests. "What a bunch of paupers," he muttered as he shoved the loot into his spatial pouch. The demon wolves' lair held nothing but a scatter of white bones. Disappointed, Dewey left the North Downs and flew west. His next sign-in point was Annúminas, after which he would head southwest toward the Grey Havens. Annúminas had once been the capital of Arnor, but when Arnor split into Cardolan, Arthedain, and Rudor, the city lost its prominence and was eventually abandoned. It would only be restored much later when Aragorn became king. From the North Downs to Annúminas was roughly the distance between Weathertop and Fornost. Thorondor carried Dewey for half a day. Below them, a large lake gleamed in a distant valley, Lake Nanuil, the twilight lake on the outskirts of Annúminas, source of the Brandywine and the border of the Shire. Chapter 186. Annúminas Lake. Evendim lay ringed by rolling hills on three sides. To the east it opened onto a plain where the lake's outflow ran east, then swept south toward the sea. Dewey rode a great eagle high above the water, surveying the scene below. What came into view was the ruined lakeside city built on a hillside to the southeast, Annúminas, the former capital of the lost kingdom of Arnor. The city was ancient and magnificent, its buildings of white marble. Time and war had taken their toll, but Du Yi could still make out the market quarter, residential districts, pools, gardens, a royal palace, and many other man-made structures from the remaining walls and standing ruins. At the very center rose a proud round tower, almost level with the surrounding heights, the chamber of Anuminas, the seat of the kings. Here the ancient kings of Arnor, and even Elendil himself, had once held court. The chamber had once housed the Anuminas Palantir, one of the northern kingdom's seeing stones, its counterpart being the Amon Sul Palantir in the great tower of Weathertop. The scepter of Anuminas had also been kept here, a royal heirloom from Numenor, later the symbol of Arnorian kingship. When Arnor fractured, both the Anuminas Palantir and the scepter had been taken to Fornost, Arthedain's capital. After Arthedain fell to the Witch King of Angmar, the Palantiri were carried across the sea by the last king of Arthedain and were lost beneath the waves. Only the scepter of Anuminas was recovered after Fornost's capture and entrusted to Elrond. Du Yi had seen it in Rivendell, placed beside the broken sword Narsil. To the east of the city lay the King's Road, the burial way of Arnor's kings, including the tomb of Elendil, founder of the realm. The once majestic city gate and high walls still stood. Even abandoned, this greatest human city of the north retained an indescribable beauty and a deep sense of history. Unlike Fornost and other towns destroyed in war, Anuminas had been abandoned deliberately and therefore had not been sacked, so its main buildings remained largely intact. If restored, the city might yet reclaim some of its former glory. Du Yi patted the great eagle's flank. "Sauron dog, let's go down," he said. He intended to land and take a closer look. As the eagle descended toward Anuminas, a group of figures appeared in a corner of the city below, leveling bows and arrows and watching the large bird and its rider with wary eyes. Seeing their tall, dark-haired appearances, Du Yi made a quick guess about who they were. "Are you Dunedain? I mean no harm," he called in a quiet voice that nonetheless carried clearly. The archer's pupils narrowed. They sensed this newcomer was not ordinary. They lowered their weapons slightly but remained on guard. The great eagle's enormous wings beat the air and stirred a strong wind, which only increased their awe. The eagle finally touched down in a wide, plaza-like space. Du Yi leapt down and approached the watchful group with a friendly smile. "There's no need for alarm. I was just passing by and saw this magnificent ancient city. I came down to admire it. Forgive me if I've caused a disturbance." "Who are you?" asked the eldest among them, a ranger in his 40s or 50s. "I am Du Yi, and I live at Weathertop," he answered. The ranger's face lit with surprise. "Are you Du Yi, the black-robed wizard, the lord of dragons?" "That would be me." Du Yi nodded, smiling. The Dunedain visibly relaxed and put away their bows. "I am Talmir," the elder said, introducing himself and his companions. "These are Kellen, Kellum, Anfalis, and Findel. We are of the clan that guards this place." Talmir glanced at Du Yi with guarded curiosity. "Where are you bound, wizard? Why pass through here?" Du Yi didn't mind the question. He was a little surprised to find guardians here. "I heard Anuminas had long been abandoned. I didn't expect anyone still watched over it. I'm on my way to the Grey Havens to visit their lord, and I'm taking the chance to see some old sights. I stopped at Fornost in the North Downs, but it had been ruined, so I came here instead to admire the ruins." "You went to Fornost? Did you disturb the evil things said to sleep there?" Talmir asked, alarmed. Du Yi shook his head. "I had some trouble. I found evil spirits, goblins, even wargs." The Dunedain exchanged looks of shock. They knew well to avoid Fornost, and had spread stories of its hauntings to keep folk away. Orcs and goblins were a nuisance, but wargs were a grimmer matter. The rangers had fought them many times and suffered heavy losses. Hearing Du Yi had encountered, and then casually mentioning it, set them on edge. Du Yi smiled and reassured them. "Don't worry. The evil spirits, goblins, and wargs that haunted the North Downs, I dealt with them. There's no danger there now." "You handled them all?" the men breathed. Du Yi explained matter-of-factly. "The North Downs lie not far from Weathertop. If those things had pushed south, they could have reached my lands unimpeded. To remove the risk, I had to clear them out." The Dunedain, scattered across Eriador and linked by letters and rumor, had long heard of Du Yi's deeds. His restoration of Amon Sul on Weathertop, the establishment of his stronghold and domain. Though the land had once belonged to Arnor and Arthedain, and thus rightly to the Dunedain, Duyi's power had made them willing to accept his authority rather than challenge him. Now, learning that he had cleansed the North Downs, they had a clearer sense of his strength. Duyi, meanwhile, was half expecting an in-system response and watched for it, but it remained slow. He turned to the matter at hand. "I'm very curious about Anuminas. May I look around?" Talmir looked to the group, then nodded. "There's no harm. I will guide you, Wizard Duyi." "That would be very kind." Duyi followed Talmir through the city. They passed through the market and residential quarters, wandering past pools and gardens as Talmir recounted the city's history and pointed out places. Duyi was no longer impatient about the system. He let himself enjoy the tour. They reached the King's Road, a solemn, mysterious avenue lined with the tombs of Arnor's kings. Massive white stone sepulchres, simple but finely carved with reliefs and runes, recorded each king's deeds. The farther inward they walked, the older the burials became. Duyi noticed that, unlike many ruined parts of the city, the King's Road was kept clean, clearly tended by living hands. At the road's end loomed the largest tomb. Before it stood a tall statue of a king, gripping a sword, Narsil, and looking out with imposing dignity. "This is the resting place of Elendil," Talmir said reverently. "The High King who founded Arnor, the greatest of the Dunedain." Talmir bowed to the statue. Duyi also bowed, honoring a monarch who had once faced Sauron himself. To him, Elendil was the kind of hero worthy of deep respect. As a mark of that respect, colorful orchids sprang up at the statue's base, blooming in an instant. Talmir felt a surge of warmth and respect for Duyi at the display. They left Elendil's tomb and continued their tour, finally ascending to the highest point of the city, the Chamber of Anuminas, where the king's throne once stood. There, at last, the system stirred. Hogwarts check-in system. Locating Anuminas, Chamber of Anuminas. "Do you wish to check in?" Duyi thought once simply, "Check in." Chapter 186, The Ravenclaw Diadem. Sign in successful. Congratulations, you have obtained the alchemical formula for the Ravenclaw Diadem. The Ravenclaw Diadem. Duyi stared at the message, stunned, then pleasantly surprised. He had not expected this from a simple sign-in. The diadem was the relic of Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the founders of Hogwarts and the cherished treasure of Ravenclaw House, said to enhance the wearer's wisdom. For generations, students and scholars had sought it. Its legend had even spawned a tragic story spanning 1,000 years. Rowena's daughter, Helena, envied her mother's wisdom, believing the diadem to be its source. She stole it and fled to Albania. When Rowena grew ill, she sent the Bloody Baron, who loved Helena, to bring her home. The Baron found Helena in an Albanian forest, but she refused to return and hid the diadem in a hollow tree. In a quarrel, love turned to fury. The Baron killed Helena and then took his own life. Rowena, grief-stricken, died soon after. Helena and the Baron became ghosts and returned to Hogwarts as the Grey Lady and the Bloody Baron. Centuries later, Voldemort, still a student, learned the diadem's hiding place from the Grey Lady and made it his 5th Horcrux, hiding it in the Room of Requirement. It survived until the Battle of Hogwarts, when Crabbe's Fiendfire finally destroyed it. Through all this, the diadem that allegedly increased wisdom had never shown a clear power, and the truth remained murky. Now, holding the alchemical formula, Duyi knew the rumors were not false. Rowena Ravenclaw had been famed for her wisdom, and less widely known, a master alchemist. The Ravenclaw diadem was one of her creations, an alchemical device that amplified mental potential. It did not confer boundless wisdom at a touch, but it accelerated brain function, sharpened perception, helped the wearer grasp information faster, understand complex ideas more quickly, and think and analyze with greater clarity. It could not fill an empty mind. One still had to learn. That was why Rowena engraved the words, "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure," as a warning that the diadem did not create wisdom out of nothing. Knowing the diadem only stimulated mental ability and did not magically bestow understanding did not disappoint Duyi. It made him want it all the more. For study and research, it was the perfect aid. With quicker comprehension and better analysis, knowledge would accumulate and true wisdom would follow. In the magical world, there was also a potion, Baruffio's brain elixir, the wit-sharpening potion, which produced similar effects. Students sometimes took it before exams to clear the mind, though the practice was banned during major assessments like the OWLs and NEETs. Caught, you could be disqualified. The potion's effects were short-lived and excessive use caused dizziness, blurred vision, anxiety, and other side effects. Compared to that, the Ravenclaw diadem was a permanent, safer enhancement. For Dewey, this sign-in alone made the trip worthwhile. Having signed in, Dewey did not mean to linger in Annúminas. He was saying his goodbyes to the Dunedain and preparing to summon Thorondor, the great eagle, when he noticed Thorondor circling over Twilight Lake, entertaining a cloud of large white birds. As a great eagle, Thorondor ruled the sky. He could communicate with other birds and commanded deference. The flock that swirled around him, like attendants around a sovereign, plunged into the lake and brought up fish to feed him. Dewey drew closer and realized the birds were owls, enormous white owls. Their wingspans stretched 4 to 5 meters. Their feathers were immaculate, the color of first winter snow, light and ethereal. "What species are those owls?" he asked Talmir, who was at his side. Talmir watched them with an amused smile. "They're great snowy owls, once found on Númenor. When our ancestors crossed the sea to Middle-earth, a few came with them. They're very rare now. They live in the northernmost pine woods of the Twilight Hills and often come to the lake to fish." "Are they tamed?" Dewey asked. Talmir shook his head. "They're proud. They don't resist people, but they don't submit. They like their freedom. Even if they accept you, it's usually temporary, like a visiting lord, not a servant." The moment Dewey heard they were unclaimed, he stopped being polite. A wizard without an owl as a pet was almost unthinkable, and these were magnificent. He had once considered ravens, as the dwarves used, but these great snowy owls were far more suitable. Thorondor, magnificent as he was far too large to be a messenger. So with a grin, Dewey shifted, became an owl by animagus, and flew toward Thorondor and the flock. As an owl, he could understand their language. He heard the great snowy owls calling Thorondor king and offering him fish as tribute, their tones oddly fawning. Were these the proud birds Talmir had described? They sounded like sycophants. "Thorondor, are these your new friends?" Dewey, as an owl, asked, landing before the great eagle. "Master!" Thorondor exclaimed at once, recognizing Dewey's animagus form, and puffed with pride as if showing off. The great snowy owls gaped. A great eagle calling an owl master left them stunned. One of them dropped a fish out of disbelief. Dewey amused himself, teasing them. "Yes, what surprised?" The owls looked as if the world had tilted. An owl had become the master of a great eagle? Surreal. After a brief game, Dewey flew onto Thorondor's back and shifted back into human form. The flock relaxed. It was a human after all, but then stared at him with the same bewilderment. Owl or man? Dewey smiled, warm and persuasive. Since Thorondor had already vouched for them, the rest was easy. He promised comfortable owl houses at Weathertop and an endless supply of fish. With Thorondor chiming in, the boasting Bird King, the naive great snowy owls were convinced. Over the next days, more than 300 great snowy owls, chicks and eggs included, followed Thorondor in a stately migration and settled at Weathertop. Several Dunedain watched the procession in slack-jawed silence as the owls, clutching nests and young, made their way. Night fell. Dewey decided to remain in Annúminas. He would wait for Thorondor to lead the owls to Weathertop before flying out. Recruiting the owls was only the first step. To turn them into precise letter carriers, like those in the wizarding world, they would need a special owl potion. After drinking it, the owls would grow keener and more human-like in intellect and gain extraordinary navigational precision. They would be able to find any recipient, even if the person was moving, and regardless of distance unless obstructed by magic. There was no hurry to brew it now. He would do that after he returned home and had time to prepare. The next morning, Thorondor came back at dawn with a letter from Arwen. Dewey read her careful, longing handwriting and smiled. Arwen had taken to the pristine great snowy owls and at Dewey's request had arranged for the tribe to be sheltered in a tower and was planning a proper owl house for them. Dewey folded the letter and slipped it into his space pouch. He bade the Dunedain farewell, mounted Thorondor once more, and flew southwest toward the Grey Havens. As the afterglow of the setting sun fell over the Grey Havens, a great eagle carried Dewey to the place. The Grey Havens sit at the mouth of the Loon River in Loon Bay. The bay itself is like a giant arrowhead piercing into the continent, cutting into the Blue Mountains and pointing toward Eriador. From afar, one could see the road that leads westward toward Rivendell. Buildings cling to the cliffs on either side of the bay, hewn from massive stone. Lighthouses stand guard at the mouth of the harbor, tall, warm beacons that push through the mist and guide ships for leagues. Many vessels lay at anchor, tall ships with proud masts and small, delicate boats that bobbed with the tide, together forming a scene of quiet motion. Dewey watched the Grey Havens from the air, then had the great eagle set him down on the road outside the port. The Elves had seen the eagle coming. It was a messenger of the Valar and a friend of the Elves, so they looked up with curiosity rather than alarm. This place gathered Elves bound for the Undying Lands, and the Havens were one of Middle-earth's most concentrated elven centers. Noldor, Sindar, and Sylvan kin all could be found here. The eagle beat its wings and scattered the fog. The anchored ships rocked with the swell. Dewey leapt lightly to the ground. A silver-haired elf stepped forward and, in the common speech, asked, "Guest from afar, what brings you to the Grey Havens?" Dewey returned the bow and answered in Elvish, "I am Wizard Dewyer of Weathertop Hogwarts Castle. I have come to see Lord Círdan." The silver-haired elf's face brightened in recognition. He returned the bow with an elegance born of long practice, then spoke in Elvish. "So the Lord of Amon-Sul has arrived. Tales of you reached us from the west, and to see you in person is an honor. I am Galdor, secretary to Lord Círdan, though you arrive ill-timed. Lord Círdan sailed recently with a company of elves for the Blessed Lands, and has not yet returned." Dew was surprised. "That is unfortunate," he said. "Lord Elrond entrusted me with a letter for Lord Círdan. I had not expected him to be away." Hearing that the letter was from Elrond, Galdor's interest sharpened. "Wizard Dewey, there is no need to hurry. Stay here a few days. If all goes as usual, Lord Círdan should be back within a month." "That will do," Dewey replied. Seeing Círdan was secondary to his purpose. His true aim was the Mercury of Spirit. Galdor led him into the Grey Havens proper. The harbor was ringed by high stone walls, some carved straight from the cliff, others built of great blocks, formidable, difficult to scale. Fortresses and watchhouses sat upon the cliffs, easy to defend and commanding the sea. The inner harbor was broad enough for many ships, though the exit narrows into the bay. Lighthouses marked the channel. A perpetual mist clung to the water here, lending the place its hush and mystery. Galdor took Dewey to the boathouse, a cliff-cut complex hollowed directly from the rock. Floors and chambers, modest and elegant in true elven fashion, opened onto a broad terrace with a view of the ships and the endless ocean beyond. It was late. Dewey did not rush into his search. He sat on the terrace and watched elven sailors return by boat while the sun eased into the sea. As for the great eagle, called Sauron Dog by strange custom, Dewey need not worry. It flew off to the cliffs of the nearby Blue Mountains to rest. The elves of the Grey Havens were primarily Teleri, those closest to the sea, skilled shipwrights and navigators. Círdan the shipwright was their foremost figure, the steward of vessels for the westward bound. The Teleri were also singers and poets. Their voices rode the waves and braided with the pull of the tide. Sitting on the terrace, Dewey let the music of the sea and the elves wash over him like a song. The next day, he went down to the docks. Elven ships came and went, crews setting out to sea or bearing supplies between the havens and the ports of Hollande and Forlindon across Loon Bay. Hollande and Forlindon belonged to the coastal realms of Harlinden and Forlindon in Lindon, the domain once ruled by Gil-galad and now overseen in practice by Círdan, though he bore the title Lord of the Havens rather than King. The Grey Havens were not just a harbor, but the last tether between Middle-earth and the West. For countless ages, the elves' memories and attachments accumulated here until what had been only feeling became a thing, subtle, pervasive, and almost tangible. Dewey sat on the circular steps at the water's edge and cupped a little sea in his hand. The water was clear and silvered, and he felt within it a swell of spiritual currents, reluctance and attachment, memory and hope, 1,000 intertwined emotions. Galdor, who had come to stand beside him, said softly, "Elves embark here. They must let go of all ties to this land if they are to sail to the Blessed Lands unburdened. For ages, the bay has held the last attachments and memories of those who go west. Over time, the waters took on that silver light. He sighed. When my own heart is ready to go, I will leave my memories here and sail without burden. Dewey looked at the silver water with bright eyes. This was the purpose of his journey. The waters of the Grey Havens, laden with the spirits of countless elves, were a source of one of the three prima materia needed for the Philosopher's Stone, the mercury of spirit. Of course, a bucket of sea would not do by itself. The spirit within had to be drawn out and purified. Here, though, the raw material was concentrated enough to be harvested. Secretary Galdor, Dewey said, may I extract the spiritual prima materia from Loon Bay to fashion a magical substance? Galdor's surprise gave way to a smile. Wizard Dewey, do what you must. The feeling in these waters is too strong for us sometimes. If you can ease it, we would be grateful. With Galdor's blessing, Dewey set about his work. He plunged his wand into the tide and chanted. Invisible currents spread from the wand's tip into the water, coaxing the feelings and memories into form. The distilled emotions condensed into tiny silver motes that gathered along the wand until a slender, luminous filament coalesced. Dewey slipped a crystal phial from his robes and guided the silver thread into it. It flowed and gleamed like quicksilver threaded with starlight, the mercury of spirit, a materialization of pure spiritual power. Only a wisp came at first. One wisp would never suffice for a philosopher's stone. Still, it was genuine, and it made a visible difference. The water around where he worked lost some of its silver sheen and returned to ordinary color. An elf named Arga, who had been watching, brightened at the sight. Though the silver water was beautiful, its intensity could draw an unwary elf into melancholy and make them linger here instead of going west. Seeing Dewey draw out even a part of that weight pleased her. Arga offered Dewey a small boat so he could move about the bay more easily. He accepted a pale, exquisite swan-shaped craft, but he declined a crew. He sat alone, guiding the little boat by magic, leaning with his wand into the water like a player stroking strings. He sang spells as he worked, pulling threads of silver from the tide and tucking them into the phial. Passing sailors watched with curiosity, respectful and restrained. None disturbed him. He worked until sunset. The little boat, scentless and windless, glided back to the dock like a bird settling into its nest. After a long day of extraction, the crystal bottle held a shallow layer of silver at its bottom. At his current pace, it would take a week or two to fill a whole phial, but even that single accumulation pleased him. Without the Grey Havens, the natural pensive of elven feeling gathered across ages, he would never have had such a chance to gather the mercury of spirit. Chapter 189. Certain, when Dewey returned to the dock with a day's catch, the system abruptly put up a prompt. Hogwarts sign-in system, Grey Havens located. Do you wish to sign in? Dewey stared at the late-arriving message and thought. Finally, he tapped the option, sign in. Sign in successful. Congratulations on acquiring apparition. Apparition? Dewey's eyes widened. He had not expected this ability. It was an excellent skill for travel and survival. Apparition is instantaneous magical travel, used for short to medium distance movement. Because it carries risks, such as splinching, Ministry rules require a wizard to be at least 17 and to pass an apparition test to use it legally. The spellbook Dewey owned didn't include the charm, so he had never learned it. Now he finally had the chance. Unlike the Flu network, which requires linked fireplaces, apparition can instantly transport a wizard to a desired location, and the effective range increases with the depth of the caster's magic. It still required a clear mental image or memory of the destination. Knowing only a name could cause failure, misplacement, or worse. Even so, this ability would greatly increase Dewey's mobility in travel and combat, and allow a near-instant escape if things went wrong. In short, it would maximize his self-preservation. Dewey resolved that during his stay at the Grey Havens, besides collecting spirit quicksilver, he would focus on mastering apparition. Each day, he rowed out into the bay to collect spirit quicksilver, and each night, he studied the theory and practice of apparition. Beginners were especially prone to splinching. At Hogwarts, a professor always supervised, ready to respond. Here, alone, a mistake could be fatal. He had to be extremely careful. More than a week passed in a blur. At last, he had a small crystal vial of spirit quicksilver. The silvery liquid, like mercury, shimmered with tiny star-like motes. Dewey put the bottle away with care, the hard-won result of many days' work, but he planned to collect a few more vials in case he needed extra when he set about making a philosopher's stone. He also began preparing for his first apparition attempt. To be safe, he filled a vial of Dittany essence and intended to ask the elf Arga to watch over him. Before he could begin, Arga came to find him with news. Wizard Dewyer, Lord Cerdin's white ship has come into the bay and is about to dock. Lord Cerdin is back? Dewey was pleasantly surprised. He accepted Arga's invitation and went with him to the docks to welcome Cerdin. Many elves were already gathered. Cerdin's rank among them was clear. Standing near Arga, Dewey watched as a vast white sailing ship glided toward the harbor. The ship was immaculate white, unstreaked by a single fleck of grime, seeming to rise from the white-tipped waves themselves. Its lines were graceful, a swan-shaped prow, white oars, sails woven of silver. At the bow hung a carved lantern casting a warm yellow light. Dewey felt a little awed. The white ship looked like a work of art. Since Iluvatar had reshaped Arda and Valinor had been removed from the material world, only by following the straight road could one reach the Blessed Realm. A vessel that could carry elves to Valinor, a realm beyond this world, was, in Dewey's mind, a divine artifact. Its maker, Cerdin, seemed all the more mysterious. As the gangplank was lowered, Dewey's eyes fell on an elf standing at the ship's bow. He was strikingly singular, tall, robed in deep blue, silver hair, and most notably, a long gray beard. Beards were rare among elves. They possessed undying youth, and even the oldest had faces unlined by time. Only their eyes gave away age. A beard like this meant the elf was older than the already ancient Galadriel or Elrond. This was Cerdin the Shipwright, Lord of Lindon and the Grey Havens, one of the earliest elves to awaken in Middle-earth. Arga stepped forward with a respectful greeting. "Lord Cerdin, welcome home. Was your voyage smooth?" Cerdin's eyes were bright as stars, his spirit keen, and his bearing still handsome. Only the long gray beard and the depth in his gaze hinted at great age. He smiled calmly. "For the most part, we had a visit from a school of Orni partway through, but otherwise calm seas all the way to Swanfleet." Arga then gestured toward Dewey. "My lord, this is the Lord of Amonsul, the black-robed wizard Dewyer. He arrived a few days ago and brought a letter from Lord Elrond." Cerdin looked at Dewey. Dewey stepped forward, bowed, and introduced himself politely. "Lord Cerdin, I have long heard your name. I am Dewyer. It is an honor to meet you." Cerdin returned the bow with a kindly smile. "Though we've not met, I have long observed you from afar. Word of the Dragon Lord, the bane of Orcs, the Balrog Slayer, your many deeds have reached me. Mithrandir Elrond and Lady Galadriel speak highly of you, and they say your presence brings new hope to Middle-earth." Dewey reddened. "Those tales are exaggerated. Gandalf and the others praise me too much. No need for false modesty." Cerdin shook his head, smiling. His look held genuine admiration. "I have hosted the 5 wizards who came from afar, but with Mithrandir and you, I have sensed a greater burden and purpose than with the others." Dewey froze at the remark. A greater burden and purpose. He had not known himself to carry anything so grand, but Cerdin's words had no time to puzzle him further. He handed Elrond's letter to the elf. Cerdin opened it at once and read. "I see," he finished, nodded, and then looked at Dewey. "Elrond wrote that you wish to draw the bay's silver seawater. Stay as long as you need. If you require assistance, speak to Arga or myself." "Thank you, Lord Cerdin. I will," Dewey said. Cerdin then invited Dewey to visit his house, and Dewey happily accepted. Cerdin's home was not ostentatious. It resembled a noble boathouse, complete with a small private dock and a shipyard. A compact swan boat was moored at the private quay, and in the yard an unfinished ship lay under construction. Even in the guest hall, 2 ship models were displayed inside crystal bottles. One was an exact miniature of the white ship that had just arrived. Clearly, Cerdin delighted in ships. Dewey studied the other model, its oars gleaming gold. "Lord Cerdin, whose ship is this? It's perfectly made." Cerdin brightened at the subject of ships. "That is Vingelot, which I built with Arundel. It was shaped from Nimloth's white birch, with golden oars, a white hull, a swan prow, and moon-silver sails. It carried Arundel and his wife across the seas, through the enchanted isles and shadowy seas, and at last to the Blessed Realm." He nodded upward. Now it is hallowed by the Valar and set at the world's edge, sailing the ocean of the firmament, bearing the Arundel's star across the heavens every night. Even Círdan, famed as the shipwright king, spoke with pride of such a creation. Dewey felt a deep respect for his craft. Beyond the white ship's ability to touch the straight road, the idea of a vessel that sails the firmament as Vingelot did seemed almost like a spaceship. It left Dewey breathless. Seeing Círdan's single-minded devotion to shipbuilding reminded Dewey of craftsmen from a former life. A thought struck him and brought a smile. Limited by the age, Círdan built with wood. What would he have made if he had known of steamships or diesel liners? Dewey imagined, absurdly, a steel ocean liner belching smoke and blowing its horn as elves sailed toward Valinor, a jarring but amusing picture that made him chuckle inwardly. One apparition. Talking about the model ship, Dewey steered the conversation toward shipbuilding, and Círdan, who knew everything about it, answered freely. Lord Círdan, Dewey said, when you sail, the hull's strength is the first thing to consider. Wood is fragile. Have you ever thought of using steel instead? How would that work? Steel is heavy and simply won't float. Círdan started to smile at what he took for an impractical suggestion, but then he stopped. His eyes widened as if a veil had been lifted. Sparks of insight lit his face. Ideas and inspirations burst through his mind. He grabbed Dewey's hand eagerly. "Dewey, tell me about this steel ship," he said. "My intuition says this could be the future of ships, but my sight is clouded. I cannot see clearly yet." Dewey hadn't expected such excitement. Was this simply Círdan's love of ships? He nodded and asked, "Lord Círdan, do you have any iron blocks here? I need something to demonstrate." "Yes, follow me." Círdan practically dragged him to his private shipyard and placed a pile of metal before him. Under Círdan's eager gaze, Dewey, drawing from the memories and knowledge in his head, waved his wand and reshaped the metal. A large block of iron flowed and flexed like clay until it took the form of a small 10-meter steel warship. Dewey floated it into the deep water of the private dock. To Círdan's astonishment, the little steel ship sat steadily on the surface. Its draft was heavier than a wooden hull, but it did not sink. "May I go aboard?" Círdan asked, eyes shining like a child's at a new toy. "Of course," Dewey said, smiling, and conjured a gangway between the dock and the tiny steel vessel. Círdan boarded at once, touching and inspecting every seam and joint like a craftsman at a new masterpiece. Dewey followed. After a while, Círdan frowned. "It's strong, yes, but too heavy. If you drove it with oars, it would be terribly slow and laborious. That would defeat the point." Dewey smiled. "If the hull is heavy, don't use oars. Use a larger power source." Círdan stopped looking at him as a mere junior. He regarded Dewey as someone with vision. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. Dewey didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Have you ever noticed what happens when water boils in a teapot? Steam pushes up the lid. Even if you press it down, it won't stay." Something in Círdan's mind clicked. He grabbed a teapot, set it on the stove, and watched the lid lift as the water boiled. He pressed the lid with his hand and felt the force pushing it up. His eyes brightened. "Steam has that force. If we put a giant boiler on a steel ship, seal the vents, and keep water boiling, that force could propel the heavy hull even faster than a wooden ship." Ideas poured out of him. Before Dewey could say another word, Círdan was sketching the layout of a steamship in his mind. "Dewey, you are a genius," he said, admiration plain in his voice. "I can see why Mithrandir and the others praise you. This will change navigation's history. Why don't you stay in the Grey Havens and learn from me?" Círdan pressed. "Together we could build a great steel vessel that will outshine all I have built." Dewey declined gently. He knew his limits. These ideas were the crystallized knowledge of thousands of years of human progress from his previous life. He was only a conduit for them. He was no master shipwright, and he had neither the time nor the patience. He still needed to study his magic. Círdan registered disappointment. He had hoped to train an heir, perhaps someone to inherit his mantle. Círdan had long felt the call of Valinor and planned to go west when the time came, but the Valar had kept him in Middle-earth to shepherd the Elves across the sea. Finding someone like Dewey made him think an heir might be possible. Still, he did not insist. In the weeks that followed, Círdan poured himself into designing a steam engine big enough to propel a steel ship. Dewey did not interfere. He continued gathering mercury of the spirit from Loon Bay each day, and he began practicing apparition for the first time. He asked Arga to stand by in case anything went wrong, and Círdan, abandoning his work for a while, came to watch as well. Círdan cleared a spacious area and drew 2 marked circles on the ground. Dewey stood in the first, the 3 requirements of apparition: destination, determination, deliberation, clear in his mind. If one wavered, parts of the body might appear in the wrong place. Without timely repair, the result could be permanent injury or death. He raised his wand and fixed his sight on the second circle. He focused his entire consciousness on the destination, made the decision, let the thought of arriving there fill him. Then, spinning in a measured way, he felt a faint pop and vanished from the first circle. The next second, he appeared in the second. The first attempt left him only mildly uncomfortable, as if the body had been squeezed through a narrow tube, colors and sounds whirling into indistinctness. But then Arga gasped. Dewey looked down to find his left arm still lying in Circle 1. He was unnerved for only a moment. Calmly, he cast a summoning spell, drew the arm back to him, reattached it, and used a healing enchantment to seal and restore it. The limb was whole again. After that, he apparated back from Circle 2 to Circle 1, checked every limb, and found nothing missing. From then on, he moved beyond the 2 circles, teleporting around the yard at will. As his control improved, the dismemberment stopped. With a soft pop, Dewey appeared before Círdan and Arga and bowed slightly. "I have nearly mastered my magic. Thank you both for watching." Círdan waved a hand, smiling. "No need to thank us. It was a rare chance to see such marvels. It has opened our eyes." Arga nodded, still amazed. Months passed. Dewey had gathered enough mercury of the spirit from Loon Bay. The once silver water had grown pale and thin. Centuries of elven memories and feelings that had accumulated in the bay had been drawn out by his work. Even if an elf dipped a hand now, they would barely feel the old emotional shimmer. Perhaps, in a few thousand years, the tide would bloom silver once more. But by then, elves would be myth, and no one would come with white ships to the undying lands. With his gathering complete, Dewey prepared to leave the Grey Havens. Just as he was about to say his farewells, Círdan caught him and announced, breathless with pride, "The steam engine is finished." Dewey was surprised. He had not expected Círdan to produce a working engine so quickly. Curiosity pried him down to the shipyard, where a crowd of elven craftsmen had gathered around a huge new machine. Chapter 190. Forlinden Port. Círdan led Dewey to the machine and beamed as he demonstrated it. "This is a steam engine I designed after a month of study. It's cast from fine iron with a touch of mithril. A boiler fires water into high-temperature, high-pressure steam that drives a piston in a reciprocating motion. Through a crankshaft and gearing, that force is transmitted to a stern propeller, pushing the ship through the water." Dewey stared at the enormous contraption in awe. If not for the elves around them, he might have thought he'd slipped into the steam age. He wondered what fuel could produce such heat. Then Círdan produced a red gemstone, held it aloft, murmured an elvish charm, and the ruby flashed and grew hot. He set the gem into the furnace beneath the boiler. The stone flared, glowing brighter and hotter. Strange red runes bloomed across the furnace. The ruby became the hearth, and a raging flame leapt to life. Under that blaze, the water in the boiler boiled and the engine slowly came alive. Dewey watched the rhythmic huffing and sighing of the machine for a long time. The elf craftsmen around them were even more astonished and delighted. Steeped in ancient custom, they had never imagined such a device. It felt like the beginning of a new age. Círdan, as creator, regarded his work with obvious pride. He turned to Dewey and said, "Dewyer, the idea for this came from you. Name it." The craftsman looked to Dewey expectantly. Dewey smiled at the puffing engine. "Let's call it New Era." "New Era?" Círdan nodded. "The New Era steam engine." "Fitting. Then the iron ship we build around it shall be called the New Era as well." In the days that followed, Círdan and the elf smith set the engine at the heart of a massive iron ship. When it was time for Dewey to leave, he formally bade Círdan farewell. Círdan tried to persuade him to stay, but when Dewey declined, he gifted him a small swan-figured vessel he had made with his own hands. Imbued with Círdan's blessing, the swan ship was light, sturdy, and uncanny in its buoyancy. able to glide effortlessly and unsinkably on the water. Dewey tucked it into his space pouch, planning to place it on the Black Lake upon his return. Dewey also, with Cerdin's permission, linked the Grey Haven's fireplace to the Floo network and gave Cerdin a vial of Floo powder. Cerdin welcomed the connection. Having the Grey Havens on the network would make journeys from Rivendell, Lothlorien, or the Woodland Realm far easier and safer for any elf heading for the west. The great eagle Sauron dog had been behaving with unusual abandon while Dewey was away from Weathertop. Each day, he would soar over the sea at dawn and return at dusk, bringing up large, deep-sea fish. Now that it was time to leave, the bird seemed reluctant to be parted. Dew patted him on the beak. "It's all right. You can come whenever you like. The distance from Weathertop to here is nothing to you, is it?" Sauron dog cocked his head and considered, then accepted the truth of it. He settled down gladly and lifted Dewey into the air. Instead of retracing their route, they flew westward. Dewey's chief purpose on this trip was to gather the mercury of the mind, but he also wanted to activate the system's sign-in feature. Along this stretch of coast, besides the Grey Havens, 2 other elf ports lay on the northern and southern shores of Lune Bay, Hollandiport and Forlindenport. The 3 ports were only a few hundred miles apart, and Dewey did not intend to miss signing in at either. The Great Eagle carried Dewey swiftly to Forlindenport on the northern shore. Forlinden was an important harbor of the Linden realm, steered largely by the Noldor. The Noldor were Calaquendi, the Light Elves, who, having once gone with Finwë to Valinor and bathed in the light of the 2 trees, retained a faint inner radiance. Yet after Feanor fashioned the Silmarils and Morgoth slew Finwë, many Noldor followed Feanor back to Middle-earth, and their history became one of brilliance and sorrow. The Noldor were renowned for their crafts, forges, gems, and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, craftsmen of Silmarils, Palantiri, elven rings, and famous blades all trace back to them. They were also proud and fierce, qualities embodied in Galadriel and reflected in the martial history of their people. As Dewey and Sauron dog appeared above Forlinden, the Noldor below watched the Great Eagle with wary eyes. Dewey did not land, but used apparition to stand on the quay. A black-haired elf stepped forward. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Dewyer, the black-robed wizard of Weathertop. I have just visited Lord Cerdin at the Grey Havens, and I have come to see Forlinden Port," Dewey answered in fluent Quenya. Quenya was the Noldor tongue, a language now used mostly in ceremony, for Sindarin had become more common in daily speech. The black-haired elf's eyes brightened in surprise at Dewey's Quenya, and his tone warmed as he replied in the same tongue. "Your Quenya is very good." "Thanks, my teacher taught me well." A soft warmth crossed Dewey's face. His Elvish, both Sindarin and Quenya, had been taught to him by Arwen. The governor noticed the change and saw the even-star necklace at Dewey's throat. He made a quick, discreet guess. "I am Myrgon, governor of Forlinden Port," he said. "Wizard Dwyer, your name reaches even this far west. It is an honor to meet you." "You flatter me, Governor Myrgon," Dewey said with a polite bow. Myrgon invited him to the governor's manor, and Dewey accepted. Forlinden's architecture was typically Noldoran, vast and delicate at once. White walls and terraces, crystal windows, streets of polished white pebbles, and white sands along the harbor combined into a scene of luminous sanctity. Every household object was crafted as a work of art. Dewey could only admire the Noldor's relentless pursuit of beauty. In conversation, Dewey learned that Myrgon had once been among High King Gilgalad's personal guard. The Noldor suffered grievous losses during the last alliance, and Myrgon was one of the survivors. After Gilgalad's fall, Círdan took the lead in Lindon, but as a Teleri lord of the Grey Havens, he allowed Forlinden, largely Noldor, to maintain a degree of autonomy. Yet Forlinden had begun to wane. The wars of the First Age and the Last Alliance thinned the Noldor in Lindon. Their numbers dwindled with the passage of ages, many feeling the call of the sea and the longing for Valinor. Increasingly, elves drifted to the Grey Havens to sail west, and Myrgon himself admitted a growing desire to join that final exodus. "Wizard Dwyer," he asked toward the end of their talk, "I have heard that the spear Aeglos is in your possession. Is it true?" Dewey nodded and produced the spear from his space pouch, handing it to Myrgon. The governor took it with reverence. The blade seemed to stir something in him, memory, grief, and a heartbreaking pride. Eglos, Snow Point, he murmured, stroking the haft. It was forged by the hands of many Noldor, from star metal and mithril. We sought it in vain long ago. I never thought I would behold it again. Relief softened his features as if a long-held burden had been eased. He returned the spear to Duay and, smiling with a kind of quiet resignation, said, "You have fulfilled a last wish of mine. I feel the sea calling me. I fear I will not be able to wait for all my people to depart before I myself go." Duay was taken aback for a moment, then offered his condolences and congratulations. "Then I wish you a safe and peaceful voyage." At that instant, the system chimed within Dewey's mind. Hogwarts sign-in system, location Forlinden Port, sign in? Dewey felt his heart quicken. He thought silently, and the word came easily to him. Sign in. Chapter 191. Harland. Sign in successful. Congratulations on acquiring the Hufflepuff's Golden Cup alchemy craft. As the new knowledge flooded Dewey's mind, his heart swelled with delight. He hadn't expected anything more after obtaining the Ravenclaw diadem's alchemy craft, and now he had also unlocked the manufacturing craft for Hufflepuff's Golden Cup, another relic of the founders of Hogwarts. Gryffindor's sword was indestructible and could absorb beneficial magic to grow without limit. Ravenclaw's diadem could sharpen the wearer's wisdom. Helga Hufflepuff's Golden Cup was no ordinary vessel. According to its lore, it possessed powerful purification and healing properties, could absorb and store magic, and even nourish a wielder's magical power. It had a miraculous relationship with culinary magic. While it could not conjure food from nothing, a single scrap of food or a drop of wine could be multiplied endlessly, producing magically infused provisions that steadily nourished the user. The effect was subtle day to day, but catastrophic in the long run. No wonder Madame Hufflepuff lived longest among the founders. Dewey was very pleased with the sign-in rewards. With the alchemy crafts for the Ravenclaw diadem and the Hufflepuff cup now in his possession, he had two immensely powerful blueprints to make. But he knew better than to rush. These things required time and careful preparation, so he set them aside for later. He should have left Forlond once the sign-in was complete, but at Maya Ergong's invitation, he stayed a few more days. He was fascinated by Noldor forging techniques. The Noldor were famed for exquisite craftsmanship, jewelry, weapons, metallurgy, and had produced wonders like the Silmarils, the 3 elven rings, and the Palantiri. A number of Noldor craftsmen from Lindon were gathered at Forlond, and it was an opportunity Dewey couldn't pass up. Though he already possessed goblin-crafted techniques, learning Noldor methods could only broaden his skill set. A fusion of Noldor and goblin crafts might elevate his forging still further. The Noldor were impressed by his own talents, especially when he summoned that ever-growing flaming blade, and friendly exchanges of techniques followed. A month slipped by, productive and pleasant, and eventually Dewey took leave. He mounted the great eagle Thorondor and flew south across the bay toward Harland, the Sindar settlement opposite Forlond. If Forlond was Noldor, proud, smithing, warlike in temperament, then Harland belonged to the Sindar, more at one with the woods, gifted in music, poetry, and forest lore, preferring a subtle, elegant culture. The Sindar had never sailed to Valinor or seen the Two Trees, so they were sometimes called the Dark Elves. Not in a moral sense, but simply because they had not seen the Western Light. Forlond and Harland faced each other across Loon Bay, a short crossing. Thorondor brought Dewey to Harland's southern harbor, and he apparated from the Gull's Height straight to the ground. The architecture here was different from Forlond's blinding white grandeur. It favored natural materials and blended with greenery. The port looked like a coastal garden, flowers blooming, vines along the docks. Dewey drew the curious glances of the elves, but where the Noldor had been aloof and sharp, the Sindar were reserved and gentle. No one treated him as unwelcome. They only watched with polite interest. A silver-haired elf approached as he entered the city and greeted him with soft courtesy. "You must be Dewey the wizard. Welcome to Harland. I am Kalinor, port governor. I heard a wizard had arrived at the Grey Havens recently. Didn't expect to meet you so soon." Dewey smiled and nodded. "Hello, Governor Kalinor. I'm Dewey. I came to see Harland's sights. I hope I haven't disturbed anything." Kalinor shook his head and returned the smile. "You are a guest of Lord Círdan, so you are welcome here. If you like, I will show you our harbor. Duer brightened. I'd be honored. Under Kalinor's guidance, Duer toured the Sindar port city. Unlike the relatively self-governing Noldor of Forland, the Sindar in Harland were more inclined to accept Círdan's administration and had frequent contact with the Grey Havens, which explained Kalinor's courteous deference to a wizard valued by Círdan. Music and song threaded through the streets, flutes and strings, voices telling of old histories, love, and the woods. Crafts of carved wood and worked silver were everywhere. As Duer lingered in the city, the system pinged. Hogwarts sign-in system, location Harlan, do you wish to sign in? Duer silently accepted. Sign-in successful. Congratulations on acquiring the magic portrait creation craft. Magic portraits. Duer hadn't expected that. In the wizarding world, these were more than images, painted figures with independent minds, personalities, and the ability to move and speak. Hogwarts itself was full of them. The fat lady guarding Gryffindor's common room, the silent portraits in the headmaster's office that would pretend to sleep and spy through half-opened eyes. They could visit one another through frames and even act as messengers. Essentially, magic portraits were whole people trapped in paint. Duer liked the acquisition, but hit a snag. He couldn't paint to save his life. Creating a magic portrait required actual painting skill to begin with. Without that, any attempt might produce grotesque results rather than art. Governor Kalinor, Duer asked, are there any skilled painters here? Kalinor nodded. Painting is a common art among us. Most Sindar have some training. Are you looking to commission something? Not exactly, Duer answered. I want to learn, find a teacher, and study technique. Kalinor understood immediately and arranged an instructor. Duer stayed in Harland and, under a seasoned elven painter's tutelage, made rapid progress. The long-lived elves had centuries of accumulated skill. Even a patient teacher could bring a novice along quickly. Duer's work evolved from clumsy attempts to competent, realistic paintings in a short time. The master teased that Duer's pieces were technically correct but lacked the elusive spirit of true art. Duer didn't mind. Realism was what he needed. Besides, once he learned to bind his paintings with magic, he could bring the figures to life and imbue them with character. When he completed the lessons, Duer thanked his teacher with a small alchemical gift, a paintbrush that could render many colors and, when charged with magic, could briefly animate painted objects. The painter was delighted and promised ongoing counsel if Duer had questions. Duer also gave Kalinor a token of gratitude, a small piece of mithril. With farewells made, Duer mounted Thorondor and set off east. It had been over half a year since he left home. He planned first to return to Weathertop, then to head into the paths of the dead in the White Mountains to seek the Sulphur of Souls. He flew over the Blue Mountains, crossed the Shire, past the Old Forest and the Barrow Downs, and finally, after Bree, the familiar silhouette of Weathertop rose into view. The castle still shone. Two great golden and silver trees caught the sun and cast shimmering light across the keep. A flock of great snowy owls circled overhead like drifting clouds. When they saw Thorondor and Duer, they swooped down in welcome, their joyous cries filling the air as if greeting their returning lord. Chapter 192, Magical Portraits. A flock of great snowy owls escorted the giant eagle as it touched down on the castle lawn. Dewey hopped off its back and saw Arwen waiting for him. He smiled, bright and gentle. I'm back. Arwen's eyes curved like starlight, and her mouth eased into a warm smile. Welcome home. They did not need many words. Their gazes said everything. The quiet tracing of familiar contours, the easy understanding between them. They smiled, took each other's hands, and walked toward the castle together. At dinner, Dewey ate with relish while enthusiastically recounting his travels. Arwen sat close, listening as always. Oh, I learned to paint from a Cinda artist, Dewey said between bites. Would you like me to paint your portrait? Arwen's smile deepened. I'd love that. After dinner, Dewey could hardly contain his impatience. He led Arwen out to the garden and set her among flowers on a wicker chair so that the white tree and a malorn formed a graceful backdrop. Arwen let him arrange her, amused, then relaxed into the scene. Dewey pulled his painting kit from a spatial pouch, set up the easel, stretched the canvas, and began. He sketched with concentration, then laid on color. The garden was still and warm. Leaves from the tall trees whispered, and gold and silver foliage drifted down like confetti, laying a gleam across the grass. Purple clusters hung above Arwen, white kingsfoil bloomed at her feet, and Alfrin and Eleanor guarded her sides. Every Entwine flower and many others braided around her like a living frame. Arwen sat half reclined, serene and patient, watching the man paint her as if she were some beloved blossom. At last Dewey set down his brush. "Done!" Arwen rose and stepped nearer. On the canvas her likeness smiled back. Rough, a little raw, but unmistakably alive. Behind the figure, the Malorn and white tree, a corner of the garden, had been painted too. The eyes in the portrait held the same gentleness she knew so well. A warm sweetness rose in Arwen's chest. "Do you like it?" Dewey asked, hopeful. "If not, I can do another. Your image is already in my head. You wouldn't have to sit long." Arwen returned his smile. "It's very good. No more. I love it. Can I have it?" Dewey shook his head, a mischievous smile on his face. "Not yet. It's not finished. It needs one more step." Her brow lifted. He said nothing further but took her and the canvas back to the castle. In the potion room, he set a silver cauldron over a low flame, took out measured ingredients, and began to brew. Arwen watched him work, fascinated by the steady, practiced motions. When the potion in the cauldron ran a pale purple, Dewey looked up. "Arwen, may I have a strand of your hair?" She blinked, then obliged. "Is one enough? I can get more." "One is fine," Dewey said, and accepted it. He dropped the lock of hair into the simmering potion. The liquid immediately shifted to a cool blue and gave off the fresh scent of rain. He removed the pot from the heat and let it cool. When it was ready, he used a glass dropper to let a single bead of potion fall onto the canvas. The paint drank it in as if it had been alive all along. The painted flowers and trees shivered into motion. The painted Arwen's hair stirred as if touched by breeze. The picture pulsed with life, except for the eyes. In the portrait, they were hollow, blank, as if the face had no mind within it. Arwen frowned. "Dewey, what happened?" Dewey smiled and explained. "It's a magic portrait. Once imbued, it can move and speak, but it has no memories yet, so it's like a newborn, no consciousness." He showed her the spell for extracting memories. Following his directions, Arwen placed her wand at her temple and withdrew a slender memory, then touched it to the painted self. The hollow eyes on the canvas filled with expression. A light crossed the face. Then, as if a soul had been given, the painted Arwen looked up and spoke, voice soft and new. "Hello, Dewey. Hello to my other self." Dewey leaned forward, curiosity bright. "What is it like inside the painting? Tell me." The painted Arwen blinked and looked around the scene she inhabited. "It's much like the real world. I can smell the flowers and feel the breeze. I can see the Black Lake and the village of Hogsmeade below the mountain, and beyond that, distant lands. The difference is that it's only me here. No you, no Sauron dog, no Smaug, and no people of the village." Dewey felt a rush of astonishment. He had assumed the painted world would be a hollow stage limited to the scene he had painted. Instead, it was vast and whole, like a pocket world, a painted reality. The thought that a painting might open into Rivendell, Lothlorien, Mordor, or even Valinor was dizzying. Arwen's gaze softened as the painted Arwen confessed her solitude. "She'll be lonely," Arwen said. "Can you paint yourself into her world? She shouldn't be alone." Dewey squeezed her hand. "Of course, I'll put myself in, and Sauron dog, Smaug, the Kraken, and the folk of Hogsmeade. The world inside the painting will be no smaller than this one." Arwen grinned. "And as for my portrait, I want to paint Dewey. I'll make you look handsome." The next day, they returned to the garden. This time, Arwen painted, and Dewey sat for her. She did not make him hold the pose long. With her memory, she could capture every detail quickly. When he peeked at the canvas, he found himself staring at an idealized likeness, tall, commanding, and softened by warmth, haloed as if touched by light. Dewey's heart lifted. Arwen's rendering of him was vivid, in a way his own attempt at her had not been. When she finished, Dewey applied the same potion. The painted garden shimmered into life, and the painted Dewey opened his eyes, hollow at first. Dewey touched his wand to his temple, drew out a memory, and pressed it into the canvas. The painted man's face cleared. He smiled and inclined his head. "Hello, original," the painting said cheerfully. He looked around with delighted surprise. "It really does feel like Middle-earth. Arwen wasn't wrong. Next time, paint me a flying broomstick, and don't forget Smaug and Sauron dog. I want to explore and see if this painted world has borders. He turned and caught sight of Arwen by Dewey's side in the real garden. Hello, Arwen. I wish I were standing beside you right now, he added with a mock regretful grin. Even so, I have another Arwen here with me. Then, suddenly, his eyes lit upon something, and he waved. There she is. I must go find her. Without waiting any further, he stepped through the painted scene as if stepping through a door, and was gone. They watched the painted landscape empty itself. Arwen laughed softly. I didn't expect Dewey to be like that. Dewey tugged at his hair, half amused, half embarrassed. The painted Dewey's manner was only the beginning, a personality formed from a single memory. To make that portrait into a full, convincing person, more memories would have to be added over time, shaping his character and consciousness until they matched the original. In the end, if the original ever died and his memories had been fully transferred, the portrait could continue on, bearing a person's mind and history. It was not merely decoration. It was, in a way, a second life. Dewey had no intention of waiting until then, but he suspected he would have to teach his painted self some manners, at least enough to keep him from making a public spectacle. Chapter 193, The Crown of Wisdom. Arwen's portrait of Dewey, framed by Dewey himself, hung in his private sitting room. The portrait Dewey had painted of Arwen, however, Arwen kept to take back to Rivendell. The two painted versions of them seemed to migrate between frames, sometimes both settled in Dewey's, sometimes together in Arwen's, and sometimes even vanished as if off on a date somewhere. Dewey found it infuriatingly enviable. While he labored outside the canvases, the painted him lounged about, flirting and idling all day. In the following days, Dewey painted portraits of Sauron, Dog the giant eagle, Smaug the dragon, the basilisk, and Kraken the great octopus of the Black Lake below the mountain. At Smaug's insistent request, Dewey even painted vast piles of gold into the dragon's portrait. Watching painted Smaug roll foolishly through painted treasure, Dewey felt a flush of embarrassment and nearly refused to hang his own portrait in the hall alongside it. That episode of the portraits came to a close. Next, Dewey turned to the alchemical artifacts he had unlocked by signing in earlier, Ravenclaw's diadem and Hufflepuff's golden cup. These two relics represented the magical achievements of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff and stood among the top-tier artifacts. Crafting either would be extremely difficult and time-consuming. Making both at once was impossible. He had to choose a single immediate goal. He hesitated. Ravenclaw's diadem amplified the wearer's wisdom, stimulating mental potential, pushing the brain to operate at high speed, and dramatically aiding study and magical practice. Hufflepuff's golden cup was no less remarkable. It healed, absorbed and stored magical energy to nourish body and power, and could even produce enchanted food and wine. It was a powerful, practical tool, protective and sustaining, but its benefits were more long-term than immediately transformative. Dewey chose Ravenclaw's diadem. The diadem could push his intellect to its limits and yield rapid, dramatic improvement. Once he had that wisdom, creating Hufflepuff's cup would be far easier. Arwen, surprised and pleased that he planned to craft an item to increase wisdom, agreed to assist. Together, they set about preparing the materials. Dewey first took out an exquisite crown of the white tree. The crown was bright silver, as if woven from living branches, broad and narrow leaves arranged with artistic grace, their curves and folds so natural they seemed ruffled by an unseen breeze. Set at the crown's center was a brilliant white diamond that shone like captured starlight. The crown had been a gift from Galadriel after the castle's completion. Arwen had designed it, and the white diamond had been steeped in starlight by Galadriel herself. Too magnificent and precious for everyday wear, Dewey kept it among his treasures and only donned it for festivals and ceremonies. He chose this crown as the base for the diadem. From the Grey Havens, he produced a vial of mercury of spirit. He inscribed runes on the crystal bottle with a mithril solution and set it on the highest tower of Amon Sul to be purified by moonlight. Under the runes, moonlight pooled in the bottle like liquid silver, merging with the mercury of spirit and slowly purging impurities of emotion and memory. The purification would take a full month. Meanwhile, Dewey drew delicate magical patterns across the crown, using mithril as ink. With his wand as a brush and his power as pigment, He traced every leaf and branch, inscribing runes of knowledge, comprehension, and discernment into the white diamond. Then he traveled to Lothlorien, Rivendell, and the Grey Havens and received from Lady Galadriel, Celeborn, Elrond, and Círdan their understandings of wisdom and the memories of knowledge each possessed. He wove those impressions into the gem. When the mercury of spirit had been purified by the moon, Dwyer submerged the crown in it, letting the crown drink deep of the spiritual energy. The gem's wisdom light intensified. Those who stood near felt their minds clearing, their thoughts quickening. Once the crown had absorbed all the pure mercury of spirit, Dwyer waited for the night when Mercury was ascendant. In Middle-earth, Mercury is known by another name, Eärendil, a star fashioned by Varda, the star queen of the Valar, for the firstborn. In magical astronomy, Mercury symbolizes thought and communication, the star of wisdom. On the night Mercury climbed highest, Dwyer and Arwen climbed to the top of Aman-Sul's tallest tower. On the great stone platform, Dwyer drew 3 concentric magic circles in mithril, centering them on the crown. The outer ring bore runes invoking full wisdom to draw spiritual energy. The middle ring formed thought circuits, a pattern like interconnected neurons linking to the crown to conduct power. The innermost ring was the resonance core, an intertwined serpentine band of countless runes serving as the array's energy hub. As Mercury reached its apex and its starlight struck the array, Dwyer pressed his staff to the runes and intoned ancient incantations. He poured his power through the staff into the circles. The array flared with silver light and a brilliant pillar of illumination shot upward, mirroring Mercury above. The star's brightness swelled until it outshone even Eärendil. Blue starlight descended and was focused into the array. The runes flared in sequence and a steady magic field formed. The spectacle drew attention across Middle-earth. Galadriel, Elrond, and the few who knew the plan watched with expectation. Residents of Weathertop and the folk of Hogsmeade at the mountain's base looked up at the tower with shock and reverence, whispering that their inscrutable lord must be at work. Dwyer, however, could not notice any of that. He was pouring everything he had into sustaining the array and guiding astral energy into the crown, and he had underestimated the demand. His internal power was draining fast, strain tightened behind his eyes. Arwen saw him falter. Concern crossed her face, and she raised her wand, adding her own magic to the array. As Elrond's daughter and the granddaughter of Galadriel and Celeborn, Arwen carried a potent lineage of power. Even Dwyer could not match her reserves. With her contribution, his burden eased, and he drew a steadier breath. Astral energy continued condensing in the array and flowing into the crown. The gem at its center burned ever brighter. Dwyer and Arwen felt their thoughts speed up, their minds sharpen. The ritual held through the middle of the night until Mercury moved west and the projected starlight thinned. The runes dimmed and the field faded. Only the crown remained at the center, quiet. But the crown was changed. The white gem no longer dazzled outward. Its fire was contained, emitting a soft blue glow. Yet those who looked closely could sense vast, compressed light within. An immediate clarity of thought and sudden inspiration seemed to pulse from it. Dwyer bent, picked up the crown, and examined it carefully. "Was it successful?" Arwen asked. "We'll know when we try it," he said, and placed the crown on his head. Instantly, his consciousness leapt. His thinking and processing speed multiplied. Comprehension and analytical ability soared. Memories once buried became vividly clear. If his memory before the crossing had been like riding a bicycle and after crossing like an electric scooter, then wearing the crown was like strapping himself to a rocket. He had the keenest mind. "Do you feel anything?" Arwen asked, watching him closely. He found it hard to describe. Calmly he said, "It feels as if a door to wisdom has opened and an endless sea of knowledge is within reach." Arwen studied him. The crown had changed his bearing. His emotions stayed steady, almost flattened, which worried her a little. Seeing her concern, Dwyer removed the crown. The rigid calm in his eyes softened, and emotion returned to his face. "Don't worry," he reassured her. "That's a side effect. While it increases wisdom, it pushes rationality forward and suppresses emotional waves. But once it's off, everything returns. Your personality isn't altered." He placed the crown on Arwen's head so she could try it. Her mien shifted at once. Her gaze grew deeper and more composed. An aloof radiance settled over her like frost on a mountain. For a moment, she seemed more like Galadriel than ever, distant, luminous, full of insight. She didn't wear it long before she took it off and became the gentle Undomiel again. Arwen held the crown in both hands, smiling. Congratulations, Duyere. You've created something wonderful. A treasure that enhances wisdom will draw seekers from everywhere. Oh, have you decided on a name? She asked. Duyere shook his head. This crown is our work. I want you to name it, so both our names will be tied to it forever. Arwen's eyes curved and her smile deepened. She looked at the crown and after a moment spoke, Rielder. Rielder, the crown of wisdom? Dwyer asked, surprised, then smiled and nodded. It's a perfect name. 195. Saruman's Plot. Du Yi had successfully created the Crown of Wisdom, the Middle-earth counterpart to Ravenclaw's diadem. After that, he plunged into a frenzy of study and practice. Under the Crown's blessing, his speed and efficiency in learning spells, transfiguration, potions, alchemy, and Middle-earth witchcraft, elven magic and incantations included, soared. Meditation while wearing the crown was equally effective, yielding results far beyond his previous limits. The only drawback was the strain. Such intense brain activity burned his physical energy quickly. His daily food intake had multiplied, and he found himself needing to replenish constantly. For that, Arwen prepared lembas for him, which helped stave off the constant hunger. The crown could not be worn indefinitely. Prolonged rapid mental exertion was draining to the spirit, so Du Yi limited himself to wearing it for half the day and removed it at the first sign of exhaustion. Even with that advantage, he knew better than to overreach. He focused his main energy on alchemical study. He wanted to be certain when he finally attempted the Philosopher's Stone. Knowing the theory did not guarantee success in practice. Otherwise, Nicholas Flamel would not be unique in the annals of the wizarding world. Du Yi remained at Weathertop for several months. He had considered striking while the iron was hot and attempting Hufflepuff's Golden Cup as well, but that artifact's making demanded not only specific materials, but particular rituals and astrological timing. The rite required the day of Saturn's opposition, Saturn, called Lumbar in Middle-earth, which comes roughly every 378 days and makes the planet blaze even brighter than Arundel's star. That was still over half a year away, and Du Yi needed to continue his search for the remaining Philosopher's Stone components. He couldn't wait. Still, he prepared ahead. After Smog protested in tones of wounded dignity, Du Yi took roughly a ton of gold from the hoard and fed it into the mithril furnace. After repeated calcining and refinement, only a fist-sized nugget of pure gold essence remained, immaculate and free of impurities. Hufflepuff's cup did not share Ravenclaw's diadem's straightforwardness. Its manufacture was steeped in ancient Celtic natural magic. One had to inscribe fertility runes on the gold essence blank, bury it under fertile land at the moment crops were sown, and leave it there until the harvest, no digging it up in between. After harvest, healing and protection runes were added, and the essence had to be sealed inside an oak tree studded with mistletoe. It could only be retrieved once the oak bore fruit and the mistletoe bloomed. Du Yi could not afford to wait that long. He inscribed the harvest runes on the gold blank, apparated to the foot of a mountain, found the most fertile wheat field he could, and cast a disillusionment charm on himself while the farmers planted. He buried the gold deep and left a subtle magical mark before returning invisibly to Weathertop. A few days later, he said farewell to Arwen and set off for the White Mountains in search of soul sulfur. This time, he did not take one of the great eagles. Instead, he traveled first to Lothlorien by the fireplaces, then apparated to Fangorn. Gandalf was not there. Treebeard told him the wizard had left Fangorn months earlier for the kingdom of Rohan. Du Yi abandoned the idea of asking Gandalf for help. After trading several bottles of a plant growth potion for Entdraut with Treebeard, he mounted his flying broom and headed due south. Mid-flight, he glimpsed Orthanc, Saruman's tower, looming in the distance. Du Yi wasn't ready to confront that white wizard, so he bypassed it and continued south, reluctant but pragmatic. Finding the soul sulfur mattered more than a check-in. Inside Orthanc, however, things were not so quiet. In a hidden chamber, Saruman sat at a long black table, eyes inscrutable, as he watched Duyi's figure moving across the sky through a palantir. The image vanished and was replaced by a fiery, dark eye. "Sauron," Saruman said through a frown, "what do you want with me?" Though seduced by Sauron's influence and sliding toward betrayal, Saruman still kept his pride. He did not see himself as Sauron's subordinate, but as a partner. The eye did not answer directly. Instead it asked, "You were watching that black wizard just now? He interests you?" Saruman's face feigned indifference. "He's nothing but an insignificant person," he said. "Insignificant?" Sauron's voice in the palantir carried a half-smile. "If he were truly insignificant, why would you, White Wizard, use a palantir to spy on him? His reputation has grown beyond yours. Bane of Orcs, Master of Smog, and with the Grey Wizard, Slayer of the Balrog of Moria. Even east of Mordor, his tales travel." Anger flashed across Saruman's features. "What do you want?" he snapped. "I'm busy. You do nothing but brood in Mordor." "Busy forging rings of power?" Sauron's tone dripped scorn. "You wish to craft a ring to rival my One Ring, yet you have not succeeded, not even by the standard of my Nazgul." Then his voice lowered and oiled itself with temptation. "I know your ambition. I can teach you to forge a ring like mine, to grant you supreme power, if you submit to me and become my servant." "Never." Saruman's arrogance flared. Even touched by Sauron's voice, he refused subservience. "No one will make me bow, not the Valar, and certainly not you." Sauron's patience wore a mocking edge as he continued. "Tell me then, when you sought alliance with the Moria Orcs, why were they wiped out by 2 wizards and the dwarves? When you tried to turn the Dunlendings against Rohan, why did the Grey Wizard win the King of Rohan to peace, undermining your discord? Both your plans collapsed at the same time." Saruman's face darkened with comprehension and fury. "Gandalf," he spat. He had prepared 2 key allies, and both had been neutralized, his schemes overturned by Gandalf. The thought of that wizard infuriated him. He didn't want to accept that his secret collusion might have been discovered. "What do you mean? I kept everything secret. How could Gandalf know?" "You have been suspected," Sauron said with cold glee, "especially by that Grey Wizard. He's watching you." Saruman began to pace. Unease tightened his features as a storm of thoughts crossed his mind. He glanced out the window at the tall trees surrounding Isengard, and his expression turned hard. "Of course, I forgot about the eavesdroppers among my own trees," he muttered. "I should have cut them down, not left a single one." Sauron's eye gleamed like a predator. "You have been exposed. There is no place for you among the light. Submit to me, and I will send Mordor's armies to hold Isengard for you, and even aid you in forging a ring of power." Saruman smoothed his features and sneered. "Do you think I will surrender so easily? I am a disciple of Aule. My gift for craft and craftiness may not equal yours, but I excel in engineering and creation. I have devised ways to breed stronger orcs, fearless of sunlight, more robust, fit to become a true army. Give me time, and I can create even greater abominations." Sauron shifted his terms. "Then we formalize an alliance. I will send a dark army under your command enough to secure Isengard. You produce powerful war machines and bred troops. When the time comes, Mordor and Isengard will strike in concert and sweep Rohan and Gondor aside." Temptation tugged, but Saruman shook his head. "Not yet. I must first know whether Gandalf has proof. If it is mere suspicion, I can lie low and continue to consolidate power." He did not want to openly betray the side of good, not only because he would lose status and leadership of the White Council, but because exposure now would leave him vulnerable. If the Valar and the Free Peoples turned on him, he would be forced to flee to Mordor and become Sauron's servant, an intolerable fate. Sauron suggested another path. "If you need confirmation, seize that black wizard. He's close to the Grey Wizard. Together, they slew the Balrog. He must know much." The name of the Black Wizard chilled Saruman. This same strange young man had twice thwarted his designs. He nodded. "Gandalf values that youth highly. He likely knows many things, and there is something about him I do not read. If I capture him, I can learn his secrets." What Saruman did not say aloud was the recollection that had first put him on edge. When he first saw that young man, Duyi had given him a quick, peculiar look, deliberately guarded, but strangely sharp. Saruman had not understood it then. Now, sitting alone before the palantir, he recognized what that look had meant, the look of someone watching a traitor. It had unsettled him then, and still did. 196, mysterious formation Du Yi, flying south, had no idea what was happening at Orthanc. He passed over the Gap of Rohan, and in the distance saw the White Mountains stretching east to west. The range lay between Gondor to the south and Rohan to the north. His destination, the Path of the Dead, lay within the Dwemoorberg of those mountains, the entrance being an altar on a cliff above the Dimril Dale. He first aimed for a cliff top at the southern end of the dale on the mountain's northern flank. A perilous track spiraled up the sheer rock from bottom to top, carved mostly from the face itself. At every bend stood ancient humanoid statues, clumsy, massive figures sitting cross-legged with arms folded, their features worn to hollows by time, hollow eyes lending them a disquieting air. The cliff's summit opened onto a grassy plain with an old path down the center, flanked by shapeless standing stones. The grassy top served as an open-air altar, no temple, no obvious man-made structures beyond the stones and statues. This was the dark stone altar, the gateway to the Path of the Dead. No one knew when the altar had been established. It clearly predated the arrival of the Númenóreans and might go back to the age of Morgoth. The identity of whatever was once worshipped there was unclear. Elrond had offered Du Yi his conjecture. The altar was likely a sacrificial site created for Morgoth by subjugated peoples when Morgoth nearly ruled Arda. After Morgoth's defeat and banishment, the place would have fallen into disuse. Du Yi landed on the plateau and almost asked himself whether the site would accept a sign-in. Immediately, the system responded. Hogwarts sign-in system, locating White Mountains, dark stone altar. Do you wish to sign in? He answered without hesitation, sign in. Sign in successful. Congratulations, you have obtained ancient sacrificial magic. A magic book materialized. Its cover depicted a naked man hanging on a cross. The image was so striking that, if Du Yi had not known better, he would have thought it a church text from his previous life. He opened it curiously and began to read. His surprise grew with every page. The sacrificial spells inside were shocking. Rituals to resurrect the dead, bones from a father, flesh from a servant, blood from a foe, rites to sacrifice animals to heal the sick. Darker spells that required human sacrifice to gain wealth, luck, or power. There was even a love sacrifice ritual in which someone surrendered their life and soul to grant powerful protection to a loved one. The passage on that ritual put Du Yi in mind of Lily Evans. Her dying sacrifice left a protective charm on Harry Potter that deflected Voldemort's killing curse and led to Voldemort's temporary downfall. With the Crown of Wisdom's aid, Du Yi read and memorized the book in a short time. The magics were uniquely potent but grotesquely extreme, requiring life, soul, or magic. In his judgment, they were more pernicious than anything in the secrets of the darkest arts. He wondered how Lily Evans had ever come across such a book or learned from it. He did not flinch at the knowledge. In the back of his mind, he thought that, if time allowed, he might test some of the lesser rites on orcs or wargs to see whether they worked. The promised benefits were tempting. He tucked the book away and mounted his broom. As he rose into the air, though, something below caught his eye and stopped him mid-flight. The standing stones and statues were arranged in a regular pattern, so ordered that it looked suspiciously like a formation he'd just seen illustrated in the book. There was no obvious magical emanation, so he was hesitant to be sure. Curiosity won. He landed again and approached a statue. He ran his wand along its surface. Nothing reacted. He examined the base and, intent on revealing more, waved his wand to clear the soil around it. The earth churned away. To his surprise, the exposed portion of the statue was only the top. Beneath the turf, the statues were mounted on stone plinths, and the buried bases sank almost 3 meters down. At the bottom of the pit lay hard black flagstones, incised with grooves in strange, intricate patterns. Du Yi's interest deepened. He set his staff and struck the ground with a heavy spell. The earth rippled like water. Grass and topsoil slid aside in a small landslide and exposed a vast black stone floor that had been buried beneath aeons of dust. He conjured a strong wind to sweep off the remaining grime. When the black slabs were clean, the grooves became clear, slender channels running and branching like a circulatory network, interlinked in a complex pattern. The standing stones and statues occupied positions like nodes or hubs. Time had damaged parts of the design, but under a quick reparo, the damaged grooves knit back together, and the complete pattern revealed itself. It was unmistakable, a formation. Du Yi stood very still. He was unsure of its exact purpose, but Elrond's ring about the altar's possible connection to Morgoth made him cautious. Morgoth might be banished, but he was one of the mightiest of the Valar. Du Yi did not want to accidentally invoke anything tied to him. He took parchment and carefully copied the pattern, planning to show it to Elrond when he returned. After finishing his drawing, he prepared to scrabble up dust and break the formation to prevent anyone else from reactivating it. Before he could do anything more, a crow plunged from the sky and smashed onto the stone beside him, dying in a spray of blood. Du Yi frowned and looked up. Distant cries of crows filled the air. One by one, as if driven mad, dozens of them began to dive. They hit the ground, feathers and blood darkening the stone, and the crimson pooled and ran, flowing precisely into the grooves. The blood seemed to move with intent, spreading through the channels to fill the design. The formation that had been inert immediately stirred. A cold, evil aura rose from the stone. The hollow eye sockets of the statues seemed to concentrate a chilling gaze. Du Yi's unease turned to alarm. He launched a powerful offensive spell at the pattern. Bombarda! A dazzling explosive bolt struck the black stone and the statues. Yet instead of shattering under the blast, the formation drank the energy. The absorbed force accelerated the pattern's activation, and the sky above the altar darkened as if a storm were forming. Du Yi dared not waste more direct attacks. He needed something else. Sword of Flame. The Sword of Flame appeared in his hand. He drove it into the black stone. The blade burned, and flame licked the grooves, scorching the surface. The Sword of Flame's composite powers, the basilisk venom within its core, the light of Arendil, and the Ring of Air's influence, began to erode the formation. The stones resisted, and for a moment the two powers locked in a tense stalemate. Seizing the opening, Du Yi drew Aeglos, the spear, from his spatial pouch. He thrust it with every ounce of force into the carved stone. The spear's tip pierced the hard slab as if it were soft butter, and a thunderous cracking rushed outward. Fissures spidered across the floor from where the spear had struck. The grooves broke apart with splintering sounds. With a final cutting cry, Diffindo, the pattern shattered and the formation's integrity collapsed. The malignant energy quickly dissipated. The dark clouds above thinned. Sunlight leaked through again. Du Yi let out a long breath. That had been far too close. He pulled the spear and the flaming sword free and set to work, destroying what remained. He scraped and shattered the grooves until they were nothing but raw, pitted stone. He toppled and smashed the standing stones and broke the statues' bases so they could not be reassembled. Only when he was confident that the design could not be restored did he feel a real measure of relief. Mounting his broom once more, Du Yi headed for the Dweemorberg and the Path of the Dead, the ruined altar shrinking behind him beneath a sky newly clear. 197. Ghost leaving the dark stone altar, Du Yi flew low along an ancient track, threading the Dimholt forest and then dropping into a deep, secluded canyon. Jagged, ancient boulders flanked the way, and faint, crumbling remains of mountain men architecture showed through the mist. After the forest, he finally saw the mouth of the Path of the Dead, the dark door. It was carved into a sheer rock face, and the stone approach was rotten with age. One misstep could send a man plunging into the abyss. Du Yi landed his broom and stowed it, gripping a staff in one hand and a sword in the other. Symbols and script were carved across the door, and a deadly aura hung about it like a warning. He felt as if he stood before the gates of hell, beyond which only death and peril lay. He did not hesitate. He pushed through the dark door. Beyond it yawned a bottomless cavern. The crown of wisdom on his head flared. Its gems threw a cold, brilliant light that carved a path ahead. Even so, what he saw made him inhale sharply. Skeletons lay everywhere, skulls heaped in mounds, bones scattered so densely that every step crushed brittle remains. For a while, Du Yi tried to pick his way cautiously, but soon gave up. Whether he crushed one bone or 1,000 made no difference to the dead. A frigid, numbing cold filled the cave. The air smelled of rot and old sorrow. A deathly pressure seemed to squeeze his heart. What set his nerves on edge most of all was the absence of living movement, no wailing, no stirring, only the mountains of bones. That felt wrong. At the cavern's center stood a stone door. Yi pushed it open and stepped into an immense chamber piled high with skulls. Each hollow eye socket seemed to fix him with a cold, accusing gaze. By the doorway lay a single skeleton in fine armor, a golden helm still clasped on its brow. Its finger bones were locked in the crack of the door. Beside it, a blunted sword stained the stone. Whoever had been here had hacked and clawed and failed to escape. Yi recognized the remains. Baldo, eldest son of Brego, would be third king of Rohan. Baldo had once ridden with his father up the Snowbourn to seek refuge for the Rohirrim. They found the dark stone altar and the path of the dead. An old man had warned them not to enter. Baldo, young and drunken with pride, ignored the warning, swore recklessly upon a feast to walk the path. Oaths in Middle-earth were no light thing. He walked in and never came out. His bones lay where Aragorn and the Grey Company later found them. A prince who courted death and received it. Yi glanced at Baldo and turned away. He felt 1,000 hostile gazes settle on him like a weight. He braced himself and moved forward. Without warning, the mountains of skulls shuddered and tore themselves loose, cascading toward him in a churning, living torrent. Yi vanished the instant before impact, apparition, and reappeared on a high ledge. "Come out," he called, voice cold and echoing. "Stop hiding. I know you're here." For a long, bone-rattling silence, there was no answer. Then slowly, translucent figures seeped up from beneath the skulls. Mist-formed wraiths, faintly luminous, drifted into the chamber and multiplied until the space filled with them. Hundreds of thousands, a vast, churning host. These were the unquiet dead of the mountain men, souls denied rest by a curse, bound forever to the mountains where they had kept false promise. In life or in their descendants, their unrest had compounded into an army. Cursed, they could not pass to the halls of Mandos. Their hatred for the living had only grown. At their head floated one in a broken crown. His face had a sickly greenish-blue decay. Hollow sockets glowed. He bore a spectral sword and a grin that belonged to the grave. "This is the realm of the dead," he said, his voice like wind through bone. "The living may not enter. Since you have come, you shall remain with us forever." He lunged. Yi met him with the sword of flame. The ghost's blade rang against steel, and to both their surprise, produced a metallic clang. The king of ghosts looked startled. "The weapons of the living are useless against us," he said. "What kind of sword is this that can touch me?" Yi did not answer. He parried and snapped his blade back, cleaving the king of ghosts in two. The ghost's head and torso separated and fell, but as Yi watched, the pieces slid back together, reknitting with a sound like cold sutures. The king laughed, a hollow, triumphant sound. "Your sword can wound me, but I am already undead. Can the dead die twice?" They fought. Yi could land blows. Each strike staggered the king, but never destroyed him. These were not mere specters formed by dark power, vulnerable to holy light. They were cursed undead. Light and sacred force could suppress them, slow them, even bind them, but not utterly unmake them. Yi threw up a spell. Expecto Patronum. A white lance of light streamed from his wand and shaped into an owl patronus. It struck the king of ghosts, knocked him back, then widened and poured itself into a radiant shield that boxed the king in. The ghost blade hacked at that light again and again, but the shield held like bronze and iron. "King of the dead," Yi said, lowering his voice, "I do not come as an enemy. I seek only a soul object. Once I find it, I will leave and trouble you no more." The king's hollow eyes glittered. "Rest?" he mocked. "We have known no rest since Isildur's curse fell upon us. You are a wizard, then. I have heard of you, wizardry and all your wonders. If you can break the curse, we will help you find what you seek and give you the treasures of the mountain." Yi knew the story and shook his head. "The oath sworn on the black stone of Erech cannot be broken. Unless your oath is fulfilled, there can be no release." Hearing those words made the king's face twist in deeper malice. The air around him grew colder still. "Oath! Oath!" he spat. "How long have we been bound to this? We have watched our bodies rot, our kin die in generations. Our souls hollow away while the living walk free. You would come here and speak of release to us?" His grin widened until it split his discolored features. "If you cannot undo this curse, then why should we let you pass? We are many now. Thanks to Isildur's wrath, our ranks have swollen." Can you alone withstand us?" Around him the host closed in, a tide of ghostly soldiers armed with the shapes of war, their intent as sharp as the cold knives they bore. Dewey stood surrounded on all sides, hundreds of thousands of accusing eyes fixed upon him. Chapter 197, Sulphur of Souls. Facing the advancing tide of ghosts, Dew drew out the light of Arundel and poured magic into it until it shone with a brilliant, holy radiance. The light made the spirits visibly uncomfortable and stalled their advance. The light of Arundel did not slay them as it might true evil, but ghosts are creatures of darkness. Even without mortal harm, they instinctively recoiled from such sanctity. Holding the glowing crystal aloft, Dewey called again to the Ghost King. "King of the mountain, I do not wish to be your enemy. Stop your attack. I cannot break your curse myself, but I know someone who can help you find release." The army halted. The Ghost King fixed Dewey with hollow, dead eyes and hissed, suspicious, "You lie?" "I swear by my name as a wizard, what I say is true," Dewey replied calmly. "Who is it? Who can free us?" "He who binds the bell must unbind it," Dewey said. "You swore to Isildur. Though Isildur is gone, you can swear service to his descendant. If you fulfill your oath to him, you will be released." The Ghost King's face erupted with fury. A terrifying aura spilled from him. The sea of skulls around him flared with ghastly green fire that burned with a bone-deep cold. "You lie. Gondor has lacked a king for long. Isildur's line is cut off. No one can undo what was sworn upon us. Wizard, how dare you mock the king of the dead? Your bones will rot here with us." The surrounding spirits took on a more hideous aspect in the cursed flames, like tormented revenants come to claim life. Dewey stiffened at the sudden turn. The ghastly blaze made him uneasy, as if it could wound the soul itself. "Wait, I am not lying. Isildur's bloodline has not been severed," he shouted, conjuring a Patronus to shield himself from the spiritual cold. The barrier kept the flames chill at bay. "You say Isildur's line still lives? Prove it," the Ghost King demanded. Dewey nodded fast. "The royal heirs of Isildur in the north are traditionally raised in Rivendell by the Elves. The current heir is growing there now. He is to be the rightful Lord of Arnor in the north and of Gondor in the south. Narsil, broken long ago, will be reforged in his hands. His path will be hard, and at that time you can serve him and fulfill your oath." He added, "When the time comes, I will guide him here to release you." The murderous aura around the king ebbed. The ghastly green flames, the kind that could freeze the soul, winked out. "I need a guarantee, wizard," the king said. Dewey let out a quiet breath of relief. "I can bind myself with an unbreakable magical oath." The Ghost King shook his head. "You are a wizard. Magic is your craft. A spell may not bind you." "Then what do you require?" Dewey frowned. "Swear by the stone of Erech," the king said. "Swear by it to help us, or you will share our fate." "All right, I agree." Even if Dewey could not itself break the curse, Aragorn would someday. Dewey would only need to guide Aragorn then, and the oath would be honored. At that moment, the system in Dewey's head chimed. Hogwarts sign-in system. Locating the White Mountains, paths of the dead. "Do you want to sign in?" Dewey tapped his consent. "Sign-in successful. Congratulations. Manufacturing method obtained, the Resurrection Stone." Dewey blinked. He had not expected such a reward. He knew the Resurrection Stone's limits. It could call something closer than a ghost, but less than a living being. It could not truly restore the dead. For now, dealing with the ghosts was his priority, so he set the new knowledge aside. Escorted by the dead, Dewey went deeper into the caverns, then finally emerged on the southern slope of the White Mountains near the Stone of Erech. The ghosts led him to the summit. There were no trees here, only a huge black monolith, a spherical stone more than 12 feet across, half buried in the hill and half rising above it. It had long stood as the symbol of oaths. It had never been moved. Dewey studied the black stone with curiosity. He tried to lift it with magic, pushing his power to the limit, but the monolith did not budge. He tried to cleave it with his sword of flames and to spear it with Aglos, but neither weapon left a mark. The stone was of a hardness Dewey had never seen. It felt as if it were rooted to the world itself. Witnessed by the Ghost King and his host, Dewey then swore an oath upon the Stone of Erech to help the dead find release. The moment the vow left his lips, he felt an invisible force pouring from the stone. His words were taken and etched into the monolith, becoming part of it. At the same instant, he became aware, subtly but undeniably, that the stone had grown heavier. Had he not had that goblin-born sensitivity to magic, he might have dismissed it as imagination. Of course, the stone of Erech absorbed oaths and grew weightier with each binding. Over the ages, it had held countless vows. Its burden must be as great as the mountain itself. No amount of wizardry could lift such a load. Another chime from the system sounded. Hogwarts sign-in system, locating the stone of Erech. Do you want to sign in? Dewey let himself sign. Sign in successful. Manufacturing method obtained, the Marauder's map. Better than nothing, he thought with a wry smile. With the oath made, the Ghost King's demeanor softened. Since you have sworn, you are our guest, he said. What do you seek? We will help you search anything that lies in this mountain. Dewey did not hesitate. I am looking for something called Sulphur of Souls. It looks like sulphur and appears wherever souls gather. Have any of you seen it? Sulphur of Souls? The Ghost King frowned. It was a name he had not heard. He turned to his attendants. Most shook their heads. One female spirit, hesitant, answered, I remember yellow ore in another tunnel, stained by our tears. Perhaps that is what you mean. Dewey's heart lifted. Lead me. They led him deeper into the mountain, to a place the ghosts called the Wall of Memories or the Wall of Sighs. Before this black stone face, the dead said their minds cleared. They dwelt on their living memories and regrets, consumed again by the oath they had broken. Dewey reached out and touched the wall. The surface felt metallic and painfully cold, like touching ice. The stone gave off a sinister, sorrowful aura. All around the chamber, veins of black ore ran through the rock, and on them were scattered yellow streaks, as if impurities had been left there. The ghosts said the stains were their solidified tears, collected over millennia. Dewey smiled inwardly. This was what he had been searching for, the sulphur of souls. With the ghost's permission, he mined the ore, extracting every vein that bore the yellow mineral and storing it in a spatial bag to be refined later. He worked until he had taken as much as the tunnel would yield, widening the mine considerably in the process. After half a day of labor, he turned his attention to the Wall of Memories. With the Ghost King's agreement, Dewey used Aglos to cut out a section of the black stone, intending to study it further. The ghosts watched as he removed the sample. Before leaving, Dewey renewed his promise to the dead. When Isildur's descendant, the youth in Rivendell, who would one day be Aragorn, came of age, Dewey would bring him to the paths of the dead so the 1,000-year curse could finally be undone. Aragorn was still a young man, but to those who had waited for centuries, a few more decades were no burden at all. Chapter 199, Crisis. After bidding the ghosts farewell, Dewey left the paths of the dead and emerged through the dark gate on the north side of the White Mountains. He tasted the sunlight and fresh air and breathed deeply. The passage had been rough in places, but he had made it through. What had unnerved him most was the oppressive atmosphere. Skeletons and bones everywhere, a land of death. A timid person might have been terrified into paralysis. The ghosts were the worst. Physical attacks had no effect, and even magic barely harmed them. Because they were not wholly dark spirits, even charms like the Patronus or the Light of Arendelle could only drive them off, not slay them. A few hundred or 1,000 could be handled. Hundreds of thousands would be an army no one could stand against. Dewey had been ready to apparate away the instant he failed to persuade them. Isildur's curse had bound those mountain people to the ranges. Their souls could not leave unless summoned. With them, one could sweep across Middle-earth unchecked. He did not apparate when he left the paths of the dead. Instead, he mounted his flying broom and headed for Edoras, the capital of Rohan, close by and not far from the dark stone altar. He planned to check in and see if he could find Gandalf, but as he prepared to fly, the sky above him suddenly darkened. Black clouds rolled in, and then, without any warning, a thick bolt of lightning lanced down, heading straight for him. Lightning moved too fast for an ordinary reaction, but Dewey had the invisible crown of quick thinking. His mind snapped into overdrive. In a fraction of a second, he apparated off the broomstick. There was no time to grab it. The broom was split apart by the strike. Dewey rematerialized on a mountainside a short distance away, heart pounding as he watched the lightning strike vanish into the air. Someone had fired it. This was no accident. He hardly had time to consider who or why before another bolt came down. This time, it hit the mountaintop, fracturing glacier and stone. The White Mountains shook, centuries of ice and snow tore free. A titanic avalanche thundered down the slopes. Dewey apparated again. He reappeared hundreds of kilometers away, outside the mountain range, the limit of his current teleport range. "They shouldn't be able to get me now," he muttered, and then another bolt struck from the darkened sky. "Super Protego," Dewey called, raising his staff. A blinding white light flared from the staff tip and unfolded into a solid defensive dome over him. The lightning, thick and furious, pounded the barrier, crackling and hissing. Ozone filled the air. Under the onslaught, the shield opened ragged holes, which Dewey repaired feverishly with his magic. When the storm finally abated, he collapsed, panting. The ward fell apart. The ground for hundreds of meters around him was burned to scorched earth. Only the bare footprint of the shield remained unmarked. He looked up and shouted, cold fury in his voice. "Sauron, I know it's you. Why are you attacking me? Aren't you afraid Gandalf and Lady Galadriel will find out?" No answer came. Dewey drew a palantir from his spatial pocket and fixed its inner surface with intent. The view of Orthanc sprang into being. That strange tower of 4 great stone pillars joined as one, its summit splintered into jagged points. Saruman stood on the top platform, staff in one hand, a palantir in the other. The wizard looked up at the sky and called, and then the perspective in Dewey's palantir shifted. He was looking into the other stone. Saruman's face filled the glass. He feigned surprise and sneered, "Who? It's you, that boy who trails after Gandalf. Why are you spying on me?" Dewey was infuriated at the shamelessness. "Saruman, an honest man does not strike from the dark. I have no quarrel with you, so why ambush me?" Saruman scoffed, denying it outright. "Nonsense. Why would I attack an obscure nobody? I am in Isengard. How could I reach you from so far away?" Then his expression changed, becoming sharp and predatory. "Let me see what secrets you hide, boy, that you call yourself a black-robe wizard and dare to stand with us." A brutal probing force slammed into Dewey's mind through the palantir, trying to tear into his memories. If it succeeded, he would lose everything. His secrets plundered, his thoughts scattered. Dewey fought back with every ounce of will, and at the same time he produced the star glass. The bright light of Arundel flared into the palantir, obliterating vision within the stone. Saruman, caught off guard and momentarily blinded, reeled and wept with the brightness. Legilimens. Dewey sent the counterattack through the stone. Palantiri could not only show, but also transmit thought. Modest power could pass between them. For an instant, Dewey felt Saruman's memories and schemings flood him. Saruman's mind, as a Maya, towered over Dewey's. It should have been impossible to wrench anything from it. But Saruman was arrogant and startled by the light, unprepared. Dewey snatched a few fragments, hints of his conspiracy with Sauron. Saruman reacted like an enraged beast. He slammed up a mental bulwark that threw Dewey back. "Dewyer, I want you dead," he roared. Dewey's head swam. He severed the connection, shoved the palantir and the star glass back into his pocket, and apparated away. He had to warn Gandalf and Galadriel that Saruman already suspected him. Saruman was not willing to let him go. The moment Dewey reappeared, lightning came again, as if it had anticipated his location. Dewey had no time to vanish. "Confringo!" he shouted and hurled a red burst at the falling lightning. The collision detonated in a blinding flash and a thunderous blast. The bolt shattered into shards of energy that ripped at everything nearby. The impact sent Dewey tumbling, skidding over 10 meters and slamming into the ground. He groaned, pale. Several rents burned into him by the electric blast. He pulled an Entdraut from his pouch and drained it. The wound's knit and color returned to his cheeks. When yet another bolt struck from the sky, he apparated without hesitation. Each time he teleported, he left a brewing crackle behind, but the storms kept finding him. Once, the instant he arrived, he threw up a Protego and vanished in the delay. Once, there was no bolt at all, only the unsettling silence that made him itch with unease. Then he discovered he could not apparate anymore. His attempt to slip away stuttered and failed. A voice, cold and triumphant, cut through the air. "Do not struggle. I have foreseen every move you might make. This place is cursed by me. Your teleportation magic is useless here." Saruman made himself visible across a field of scorched grass, mounted on a tall white warg. A cunning sneer lit his sharp eyes. "Do not resist, Black Robe Wizard. I do not wish to kill you yet. Come quietly." Chapter 199, Ultimate Showdown. Avada Kedavra! Dewey did not hesitate. A blinding green bolt streaked toward Saruman, but the white wizard calmly leveled his staff at a nearby boulder. It rose and slammed into the curse, blocking it outright. "Slinging such foul dark arts," Saruman sneered. "Gandalf must be losing his wits to count you among his own. A dark wizard like you ought to be locked up and interrogated. See if you've been consorting with darker powers." Dewey snorted. "Who's consorting with darkness? Saruman, you'd know that better than anyone. If I hadn't seen it in your memories, I would never have believed you bold enough to parley with Sauron. Aren't you afraid of playing with fire and ending up his puppet?" Saruman's expression hardened. His eyes froze on Dewey. "I know not what you mean. I, a dignified white wizard leading the righteous way. How could I possibly dance with darkness?" "Boy, slander me like that, and I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget," Saruman snarled. He slammed his staff down and loosed a crackling bolt of lightning toward Dewey. "Bombarda!" Dewey reacted instantly, returning a spell of his own. The two magics collided in a thunderous explosion that turned the nearby ground to scorched earth. A shockwave hurled Dewey backward. Midair, he adjusted his posture, and the instant his feet touched ground, he shifted, animagus, and became an owl, beating his wings toward the perimeter. If he could get past Saruman's anti-apparition ward, his mobility would be far greater. Saruman would not let him go. Without a word, the great warg beneath him surged forward, closing at terrifying speed. Saruman chanted in ancient Quenya, raising a storm to slow the owl down, then unleashed huge fireballs from his staff that crashed into the earth and left massive craters. Dewey twisted in the wind, narrowly avoiding each burning sphere. Seeing Saruman bearing down, Dewey dove straight at him, shifting back to human in mid-flight. Confringo, he cast at close range, but Saruman lifted his staff and easily dissipated the blast. Before Saruman could sneer at the attempt, a sharp, silvery spear flew in a hair after the spell. Indestructible and honed to pierce magic itself, it cleaved through the warg with a single, heartbreaking howl. Saruman leapt free but staggered to his feet, watching his mount die beneath him. "Aeglos, the spear of Gil-galad," Saruman muttered. "I did not expect Gil-galad's weapon to be in your hands. Your luck, young man, is enviable." "It's a pity," Dewey said lightly, "that both the spear and the palantir will become part of my collection. You have nowhere to run." Saruman slammed his staff into the earth, sending gargantuan shockwaves toward Dewey. "Protego Maxima!" Dewey threw up the strongest shield he could, but under the onslaught it shrank and crumpled, while the force shoved him backward until his feet gouged furrows in the soil. He gritted his teeth as relentless waves of magic battered him. For the first time, he felt the true breadth of a white wizard's power. If he had no other hope, he feared he would fall here. Saruman sneered. "Do not wriggle, dark wizard boy. You cannot fathom a white wizard's power. The gulf between us is as a stream to the ocean. If you were of use to me, do you think I would have let you gamble so long?" He struck again. A more powerful shockwave shattered Dewey's shield like glass and sent him tumbling. His staff flew from his hand and came to rest some distance away. Dewey hit the ground hard, breath knocked out of him, pain flared through his limbs, and vision darkened. For a beat, he almost blacked out. Saruman picked up the staff and held it up, a thin smile of contempt and envy curling his lips. "Malorn wood core with an Alessar emerald. Such a staff in your hands. What a waste of the Valar's bounty." When Saruman had first come to Middle-earth, he had sought an elven gem from Galadriel to fashion the mightiest staff. He had not been granted the favor of an Elessar. To see such a treasure in Dewey's possession rankled. He took both staffs and strode to where Dewey lay. But Dewey was already stirring. The ent draught he had drunk still worked wonders, knitting flesh and steadied breath. His staff gone, Dewey flexed and a wand strapped to his left arm sprang free into his hand. He clenched his right fist, and the sword of fire shimmered into being. He flicked his wand, and the surrounding trees shuddered to life and surged toward Saruman. With a broad swing, he sent a searing blade of hot air cutting the way. "Trees? I hate these trees the most." Saruman hissed as the animated trunks recalled Ents. With one staff, he wove a barrier to deflect the arboreal strikes. With the other, he threw fire, burning the living wood. He rolled away from the air blade with an agility that belied his years, then, irritable, shoved the attacking trees aside and pointed a staff at Dewey. A blunt force pinned Dewey to a thick trunk, flinging his wand and sword of fire to the ground. "Game over," Saruman said coldly. He advanced, pressing the staff against Dewey to hold him immobile, and glanced at the fallen wand. "This little stick is your own creation?" He picked it up and turned it over with a measuring eye. Jealousy flashed in his face. The wand showed signs of original design, innovative, versatile, and that it came from one he had despised rankled him further. When he tried to command it, the wand resisted, refusing to serve him. Saruman's scowl deepened. A weak wand, daring to defy Saruman the White. He tightened his grip until the wand creaked. At that instant, pinned to the trunk and within inches of Saruman, Dewey exploded outward. Sword of fire! The blade that had fallen skittered across the earth and vanished, summoned back into his hand. Another wand leapt free into his other grasp. "Finite incantatum," he cried. The second wand unleashed a spell that snapped the binding off him. Simultaneously, he swung the sword of fire with all his strength. Saruman had not expected another wand. He lunged, staff raised, and the sword of fire met wood with a ringing clash. Sparks flew as the blade bit a scorched gap into the staff, and a hot edge sliced away a section of Saruman's beard and hair. The stench of singed hair filled the air. Out of fury and humiliation, Saruman unleashed a terrifying surge of magic that blasted Dewey backward. "You deserve to die!" he roared, sending a bolt of lightning after him. Dewey sucked in a breath and threw up a desperate defense. "Bombarda! Protego!" The explosion and lightning met, and though the shock hurtled him back, the shield charm kept him from being mortally struck. More great fireballs arced toward him. He dodged and dispersed them, then took a steadying breath and snorted. "You think you have the monopoly on fire?" He called up Fiendfire. The malevolent flame spread and coalesced into a Fiendfire basilisk that lunged at Saruman. The White Wizard's face darkened. He beat the creature back with wave after wave of raw power. Dewey poured forth more magic. The Fiendfire remade itself into a Balrog, huge and terrible, whipping a Fiendfire lash at Saruman. I do not fear even a true Balrog, let alone your imitation," Saruman barked. He blasted the fiery Balrog with his staff, keeping it at bay, then struck it with lightning. The creature screamed and collapsed into smoke. At that moment, Dewey's face brightened. The Fiendfire's spread had, unexpectedly, dispelled Saruman's ward. The anti-apparition magic around them was gone. Dewey vanished and reappeared behind Saruman in an instant, shouting, "Avada Kedavra!" Saruman reacted with the same speed and parried the lethal curse. Dewey flicked himself away and reappeared elsewhere, launching another attack. He slipped and darted, apparating in and out, harrying Saruman, guerrilla strikes, never lingering long enough to be pinned down.